They get all the issues, all the IT issues squared away?
Yes, the things are working better than they did before the issues.
No, that's good.
It's funny, it's all related to how different IT techs interpret how to implement things.
So what I hear you saying is most of the IT problems are caused by IT people.
At least a portion of them are.
I have a personal theory about that. My personal theory is that just about the time everything gets working right, the IT people get nervous that everything's working right, and that's when they change everything. Because then it gives them another a reason to be.
There is continuous job security.
Indeed. There's Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. So, a bit warm here in Dayton, Ohio, but probably warm where you are too.
It is. It's a warm day today, so it was pretty out, but it was even too hot for the dogs for a while there.
Yeah, it seems we skipped spring again and gone right into summer.
Kind of our thing, isn't it?
Yeah. See, Brad is over there in the dark.
You're not the first person to make that observation tonight.
He's usually he's like that, but then it seems when it's dark outside, I think because he's got all that light behind him.
Uh-huh.
Kirk says I brighten up as the evening moves on.
Okay. That would be accurate. There he is.
Hey, girl.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Happy last class.
Thank you. How's Breckenridge?
It's good. We're getting those spring storms, which is nice. Really windy today, but good overall.
65 degrees or something today?
Yeah, just about.
That's pretty awesome.
No humidity. It's awesome.
Perfect. Good. Well,
yeah. How's it there?
Hot.
Yeah.
Yep. Hot. But it is what it is.
That's why you're in the basement.
Yep.
I was wondering about that.
Nobody said anything last week. I moved downstairs. We have thermoclines throughout the house, and so I can be downstairs, and it's naturally cooler downstairs, and so I can save all kinds of energy.
So you have just as many books down there too.
I have lots of books everywhere. I have more books than I have house. They are everywhere. So, but I figure if I keep looking at them, I actually might learn something someday. So.
There you go.
Me too.
Well, it's 7, so why don't we get going? I'm looking at the list here of who's on, and welcome back, everybody. When we have children too, that's awesome. So this is the last official session, and it's all done tonight. When we're all done tonight, we can talk about what's next, if anything's next, and what people staying together and those kind of things. But this will be the last official session of this, and so I haven't turned it over to John at the beginning for a while. At the end, everyone's talking, so I hate to interrupt that flow. So, John, do you want to give you a moment or two to make a comment as our swan song, as we begin our swan song?
Well, as I've said many times, thank you all for being here. These sessions were something that Kirk came up with the idea, talked to Cindy and I at the foundation, and you know, we were in the middle of trying to figure out exactly what we're going to be doing with this whole situation in mid-March. Lots of unanswered questions at that point. And Kirk said, let's do this thing. And we've been smart enough to listen to Kirk when he says stuff like that in the past. So I'm happy we said it this time. And I'm happy that all of you came along for the ride and participated so well. This core group, especially week after week, we've had some really great conversations. And I really do appreciate all of your participation and feedback and the stories and the learning. It's been very heartening to have this group together each week. I'm going to ask you, before we start, make sure that your chat box is showing, because there's going to be a couple of things that I put into the chat at some point tonight. I'll throw my I haven't plugged for donations for the foundation in a while. I think most everybody here has actually already done that, but I'll throw it out there if you want to forward that to somebody else. And I'll throw in a plug for Kirk. Kirk does consulting, Kirk does classes. If you want either of those for your company, reach out to Kirk, reach out to me, and we can make that happen. And that's for all the people who watch this later on YouTube as well, Kirk. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, John. Yeah, so that's the other thing I haven't mentioned in a while. So do remember everything's up on my Facebook, not my Facebook, but my YouTube channel. And I want to especially thank Adam for that, because Adam has been my producer and YouTube channel person, and so I appreciate that. So okay, so let's get going. Dan had reached out to me last night, late last night. Not late last night, but 9 o'clock or so. He would like to talk about the piece I'd asked you about for that first. And so if you all recall, last time at the end of the session, what I'd ask everybody to do is kind of, tonight is your turn. And so to talk for about 3 minutes on your recommendations to Dan on that Westminster job. And then I've done some things on that, which I'm going to talk about, but I'll talk last about what I've done on that. And then another, 5 minutes on what you're going to do moving forward relative to surviving and thriving from moving this point out. I do want to, before we get going on Dan's job, I do want to make an observation, and again, not about politics, but an observation about culture, business, economy, those kinds of things. And when we began this thing, the introduction was 11 weeks. This is the 11th week now. When we began this, the title was Survive and Thrive in Times of Crisis. And the crises I had in mind, John and I had in mind, was first the COVID crisis. And then the second one was the subsequent economic crises that we knew we would see and will see. And so that was enough to get a now 11-week class going. I forgot to anticipate the whole society blowing up and having riots and militarization and all those kinds of things because of the murder, frankly, of an African American by a police officer in Minnesota. So I apologize for not having anticipated we would have 1919, 1929, and 1968 all mashed up together in our talks. And so without the politics, but I think it's important enough to at least raise it if we're talking about surviving and thriving in times of crisis. What is happening in your world, in your business, in your own head about, and what do you project whether or not any of this is going to have an impact on business or culture or other things? So where are you all at with And again, yeah, I don't even know how to phrase that question. Where are you all at right now relative to what's going on in our cities? And lots and lots of cities.
So, Nick in Wisconsin. Sorry you can't see me right now, but I'm eating dinner as well. So,
So are you, just to get it straight, so you're invisible when you eat dinner? Is that?
pretty much, yeah. I'm super thin. So, actually, though, we have a project across the river in Minnesota that we did see subcontractors express concerns. That wasn't one of my projects. Across the interstate highway, they actually did some looting in that area.
Mhm.
And we're even seeing it in Wisconsin with some of the subcontractors trying to get materials or coming from Minnesota that they're backed up because of it. Yeah, it's something you never thought that would happen, kind of like the COVID. I mean, just something that you didn't really forecast into your business plan when you're getting ready to send out your number. So yeah, that's been pretty interesting to see how that's been.
Do you think there's going to be any impact to your company, or are there any actions that you need to take to do anything about this?
There was security that was enhanced in the project in Minnesota. Shortly after everything kind of started happening closer to that project.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I mean, you do incur that cost, but at the end of the day, how you want to handle it, that's kind of, I think, more of a different decision than just a business decision on that part, to make sure everything is good for everybody that's going to be there,
Yeah.
whether it's a trade partner or the owner's finished product. But I think depending on where you're at, you're going to see more and more of, security being heightened. Owners not wanting to build without that extra security there.
Okay.
So it's, yeah, strange times.
All right. What about the rest of y'all?
Kirk.
Yeah, go ahead. Hi, Phil.
Hi. Actually, back in the early 90s, I worked in Vernon, California at a mobile oil facility during the Rodney King riots.
Yeah.
And I saw the immediate security issue, and of course, the same type of discussions of how's this going to change, and in fact, it was during the short term, it was a very tense situation at the time. So I've seen that element of that where it changes dramatically, but I've also seen as a country, and we're really strong and we come together about, and we saw this in the pandemic as well too, is how we come together and try to take these lessons of going forward, how to do better. I've seen that side of it as well too. Now I also, as you know, I support a project in South Africa that used to have apartheid, and there are still remnants of that kind of culture that one must dispel there as well, and issues, and so I see that side globally as well too, and it's interesting that some of my colleagues in South Africa have reached out to us because they've seen it in the press and they think that literally right now all our major cities are being looted.
Yeah.
Now there are right now I'm based in Houston, Texas, and there have been some areas where we've had some demonstrations that have gone a little bit outside the normal protocol, but for the most part, it's been more like the press has been making it more of a dramatic here in Houston versus to what I've actually seen driving around here.
And I think that's a fair statement. I actually looked into this a little bit because I wanted to make sure I was not just responding, but been far more peaceful protests than there have been, the violent protests with the rioting and the damage, and for whatever reason that seems to get less, at least seems to get less press. I like the comment. I think the comments you made are important about during Rodney King, because I was in LA during the Rodney King era. I guess I'll call it era or episode as well. And I don't know that it affected. I don't think that it really affected business in the LA basin or the Southern California basin at all. What about the rest of y'all? Thoughts, concerns, a non-issue from a business standpoint? Does it exacerbate things? Could it affect the outcomes and the effects of COVID? Could it just be, it's one of those things. It's kind of like piling on, right? The old penalty in football, piling on. Is this going to be an exacerbator, or is it really just completely a separate incident?
Hey, Kirk, this is Nick. One thing that comes to my mind is when I look I look back to athletics and, the camaraderie that's available on a good team, right? We talk about the Patriots. I mean, you either hate them or you love them. There's no in between, right? And, but when you can bring individuals together on one solid platform, I think that this whole situation's, being an eye opener of how important culture truly is. We can't assume that people feel like they fit in or that they're being understood. And I think it's, just going out of your comfort zone a little bit and offering a nice gesture, or holding a door for somebody, or those little acts of kindness that, we're always in a hurry. But if you just take a second and practice those acts of kindness, I think you'll see a drastic improvement in your communities and your companies. So at times like this right now, the one thing I keep telling myself is slow down and evaluate where you're actually at and capitalize on it.
Yeah. No, I think that's all good advice. And I like the analogy, the sports analogy too. Yeah. Anybody else? Jeremiah, do you want to talk? Jeremiah sent me an email. Jeremiah's really good at sending me thought-provoking emails. You want to talk about the email you sent and my response?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I was looking at this from 3 different angles. I was looking at the stock market and how it's continually increasing throughout all of this. I was looking at how the populations have been gathering so closely and how that'll affect COVID, and we're going to see an increase in that in the next week or two. And then also just from a destruction standpoint of how towns are kind of getting tore up. And I guess I was trying to figure out, the signs all show that the market should be plummeting, and it's doing the exact opposite of what it looks like it should be doing. And I guess I was trying to get some insight on that.
Yeah. So I responded to Jeremiah, and I'll tell you how I responded. But before I do, I'd like to hear what your all's thoughts are and insights are on the 3 issues that he brought up.
Kurt?
Yeah.
First of all, those are very good issues, and it's actually a very good observation. But at the same time, there are a lot of macro factors now that are in play that weren't in play maybe in other downturns per se. I mean, we are seeing, obviously, and sound like a broken record. You're probably tired of hearing the word renewable alternative energies come into play that affected some markets in our area, specifically my market that I've spent most of my years in, which is the petrochemical. Companies are trying to reinvent themselves in that platform. There's also the digitalization that's also affected. I think that also has compounded with this pandemic that has resulted in, okay, where do we shift our focuses to as companies? But one thing I've seen, and again, it's time and true, and I guess it's the purpose of this last meeting, and is really the purpose of this foundation, is going forward, what do we want to really take from this. And really the way I look at this is on a micro level. And Kirk, you and I have spoken in the past on this. I've spent most of my career globally, not by choice, but because candidly, there wasn't work in the Midwest for me when I was coming up as much as opportunities at the time. So the opportunities were overseas. And what was really, I don't want to say kind of disheartening, but I saw all those industries in overseas that were what I had read about or seen about in the 60s, 50s, I'd heard about in the 50s and 60s and saw in the 70s that in the 80s disappeared. And I guess what are we doing as an industry to train the apprenticeships in the next generation? So I had talked to you about this regarding my child, and he just graduated today. He had spent with me in Saudi Arabia and in Asia for at least 17 years of his life was pretty much overseas one way or another, living with us. And when we came back to the States a couple of years back, I said to him, I said, I need you to go and learn welding. Now, in the local engineering company where I lived was sponsoring with the high school a welding apprenticeship program. And he said, Dad, I just came back from Korea. Everybody's so studious over there. I'm taking AP calculus or whatever. I said, no, trust me, this is going to help you. And 2 years later, after he got his welding certifications, he said, Dad, this has helped me. It now allows me as a future engineer to see the product, to see the fabrication. And I guess as an industry, what are we doing to promote this? Promote this not only within the craft workforce, but also within the colleges and universities. I mean, you teach construction management and you teach engineering at a university that's known globally. But
Yeah.
what are we doing to make those students appreciate that? And I saw it firsthand when I was at Samsung Construction. I had all these Ivy League engineers, but yet none of them had seen how to put together a pipe, how this all works. This doesn't go in seamless. You got to put this thing together. One line is longer than the other. There's not enough sleepers or just whatever the situation is, or they're throttling the valve too much at maintenance and they've screwed up the line. Those things are not being shown in those real world. So what are we doing as an industry to promote this and ensure that this is engraved in our curriculum? That's where I see that.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think the answer is neither group is doing it as well as they could. And what I mean by that is that the university, of course, Purdue is extraordinarily well known globally for, like you said, for engineering. And we turned out some great engineers. But too often they graduate without, we get some engineers on this call too. Too often they graduate without a real appreciation for the craft worker in the field. And especially with with what it really takes to do that job well and the level of skill. Now, one of the things that we do in our curriculum and I do in my classes is, in addition to the theory and the problem sets and all those kinds of things, is everything that I do is applied. And so, for example, I've got a lab associated with every class that I do. And so if they're in a mechanical or an electrical lab, they're actually either soldering pipe or terminating a panel on electrical or bending conduit or what have you. And I don't do it because they're ever going to become craftsmen, because they're never going to become craftsmen. But I do it to give them an appreciation for the crafts worker in the field. Because too often it's easy for college educated engineers and managers to frankly kind of look down their nose at crafts workers. And everyone will deny that they personally would ever do that. We all know that goes on, sadly, in our companies. And I take great pleasure in my labs at Purdue when undergraduates who are really bright people, most of them who are really bright people, who are really struggling to make a connection or to keep something from leaking or to do something properly. And so that's how I try to do it. But I'll be honest with you and tell you that that's not the norm at Purdue. That's more of the exception. And so I don't know institutionally how to improve that. At the association level, Of course, what we have are apprentice programs, and we have both live apprentices programs and online apprentice programs, and they are, of course, very useful, and they're well done. But I'm not sure that the people who are getting the craft training are really gaining any appreciation for the people in the office who are doing the estimating, the project management, those kind of things. So the long-winded way of saying, I don't know that we're really, either one is doing enough to teach. I guess the right word really is empathy and understanding for what the other people in the company do. Anybody, do you all agree with that? You disagree with that? No one's there. Either that or we just had an audio outage.
Yeah, Kirk, I think you're right on. It goes into what you were talking about last week with kind of the awareness cross training, because like you said, a lot of times the person in the field doesn't understand what the estimator does, what they go through, and sometimes vice versa, or what the field person, what the accounting person doesn't understand on what the field person and what's important to them. So I think that fits right in line with what we were talking about last week.
Yeah.
I think we got to do a better job as an industry at maybe not complete cross training, but just training to the extent that you have a bigger picture, an idea of what everybody's doing within the organization. To at least that point.
Yeah.
I'm picturing a young Kirk Alter on a rooftop assembling HVAC units because his project manager wanted to save a little money.
Yeah, I know that asshole. Yeah, for sure. So, yes. So, and thinking about the theme, right? Surviving and thriving. Speak honestly, and now I'm kind of thinking about really current events. If you're 100% honest, is your company culturally diverse? And are you doing, or do you do anything, or do you feel the need to do anything to take your game up? Is it necessary?
This is Dan McGuire. I'll answer that question first, and I want to address a couple of the other things earlier first. Without a doubt, I mean, we're in Washington, D.C., we're in Northern Virginia. I mean, you lived in there, you said that. So at Clover, we've got the UN working there. I mean, we've got everybody from everywhere, South America, Jamaicans, Americans, Lithuanians, Romanians, people from the Ukraine. We even hire some Irish people every now and then.
Don't do that. They all drink.
They fucking like to drink and fight, but they work like hell. But so yeah, and it kind of goes a little bit back to what we were talking about earlier with the demonstrations and the Black Lives Matter, and things like that. So I remember I was a punk kid, but I remember Martin Luther King's Freedom March, and my parents took me down there to see it. Now I didn't really understand at all what it was going on, but I learned it later on in history in school, and that was about what this is about. Okay. And a lot of wars around the world are fought over, and it's equal rights.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing that everybody in the world wants, and that's opportunity. Everybody wants opportunity. So there's not as much opportunity, unfortunately, for the African Americans throughout the country. Now, in Washington, D.C., there is. Downtown Washington, D.C. is predominantly African American. And we've got a lot of excellent tradesmen. I mean, we've got a lot of really, really good guys. Mm-hmm. And they appreciate the opportunity. They're going after it. They want to do the same thing that everybody else wants to do. They want to support their families. and they want to have a career, right? And again, all that stuff boils down to opportunity. And it's very similar. Again, my family's Irish. My parents immigrated here from Ireland, and the uprising in Ireland in 1916, and then the troubles in the 60s and 70s, and things like that. And there was a huge prejudice against the Catholics.
Yeah.
Because when they had the uprising in 1916, the British kept the northern counties, because that's where all the shipbuilding and the factories and everything else like that, and they let the southern counties go to the farming, because that wasn't really any real money to them. So they didn't have the opportunity, and then that's what there was a prejudice against them, right? And a lot of reasons for prejudice, I feel, okay, are because of insecurities. I think that causes a lot of prejudice.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, even the Kurds in Iran, right? I mean, you can look anywhere around the world, and a lot of wars and things like that are fought over prejudice and lack of opportunities. And then I guess, I don't know how long it is. You're probably better on dates than I am, but the Baltimore riots, that was 3 years ago. When was that? 3 years ago?
Yeah, at least 3 years. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
And they had a picture on Time magazine. It showed a policeman chasing a black youth, and he had a nightstick, and they were chasing, and then I guess, when the hell was it? So it must have been the 70s.
The Baltimore riots were probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and I got a funny story about that, Dan. I don't mean to cut you off since you're on that topic. I was actually working downtown the first day the riots had happened, and I was 2 blocks from the intersection where they lit that CVS on fire. I had a crew working down there 2 blocks from that location, and I mean, just to see how all that unfolded in such a short time it's insane.
Well, and that's because of its frustration. It's all such built up. It's built up. I mean, they've been downtrodden, as the Irish would say, and they were downtrodden, and they have been downtrodden for so long. And that's not good. And then you get outside of the, I mean, I don't want to sound snobby or anything else like that. It's also one of the problems with our political system, the East Coast and the West Coast. You have the higher learning or whatever, and they got their nose up in the air, and they feel definitely a lot heavier Democratic, because they've got their money, they've got secure jobs, they have wealth, they have things like that, and so they will be a little bit more empathetic. But what I've noticed is that they're empathetic, but they don't do anything about it. But in the trades we do, because we need talent, we need help. We need people. There's no prejudice. I mean, I've said it many times. I mean, I'll take somebody with an eyeball in the middle of their forehead, but if they're good, they're good. And that's one thing about it. I mean, you can be a freaking wild man, you can be whatever the hell you want, but if you're good, you're good. And that's it, period.
And I hear you, and I agree with you on lots of that. And that I served my apprenticeship in DC, and DC, even my apprentice program was much more diverse, even then in the early 70s, than many apprentice programs are even still today. And it's just demographics or destinies because of population, right? That's all of that said. Many of you have heard me, some of you have heard me talk about Latinos in construction and things like that. So I'm not going to go into that tonight, but there's no doubt that in our industry, we have a diversity problem. And so there may be there may be pockets, like, for example, in the DC area, much higher level of participation of African Americans than in construction than in other parts of the country. So urban areas, so Chicago, Detroit, etc. And in the West End and Texas and things like that, in California, higher participations of Latinos. But all of that said, hell, go to a convention, go to Connect this year if we have it, or next year when we have it. Go to Connect and look around, and I think everyone would admit, hell, come to the classes. Everyone would admit that we don't really see a lot of diverse faces. Do you all agree with that? Yeah.
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 Yeah, I do, definitely.
So
Yeah.
part of this program, as we've talked for a while there, we're talking on a weekly basis of what was going on with unemployment and where that's at now. Of course, it's every Thursday, right? So where that's at now, over the last 11 weeks, 42.6 million people have filed for unemployment. 42.6 million people. Any guesses on how many adults 18 and older, how many people 18 and older there are in the United States? Take a guess.
200 million?
Yeah, it's 209 million people over the age of 18 and 18 and older in the United States. So by definition, you can paint a broad brush and say, well, that's how many are eligible workers. Now that's not really true because of because of other things. So the number's less than 200 million, but right around that. And we've got 42.6 million have filed unemployment. So we're talking about 22% unemployment of total of working adults in the United States. Okay, so that sounds bad. Yes, y'all agree with that? Yes. What do you think the unemployment rate is of African Americans in the United States right now?
Is it up at 50?
50%.
Wow.
50%. And so I think that's part of the problem. Now, there's all kinds of reasons why that is so. But nonetheless, it's one, in my opinion, not acceptable. And two, back to the thriving part, it means there is a workforce there to be captured. And so on the thriving piece, and I don't want to spend too much time on this tonight. But on the thriving piece of this, we are a good industry with good jobs. Yes.
Absolutely.
So maybe all of us in our companies, and that's a broad brush too, maybe we all could do a much better job of figuring out how to help our companies become even more diverse than what we are right now. Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
All right, good. So how are you going to do it?
I think the easiest thing to start with for us would be to, get referrals from our current African American employees if they have friends or family that have been laid off recently and might want to make a career change.
Okay. Other thoughts, ideas? Is this an active thing, or should this be an active thing or a passive thing?
Active, otherwise.
It has to be active or it won't work.
So now let me ask a harder question. Trying to think if this is going to piss everybody off, but I don't know. That's okay. If it does, it does. What don't you know that you should know about everything that's going on right now? Forget no politics. What do you know about African Americans? What do you know about African Americans? What do you want to know? And if you want to know anything that you don't know, how are you going to go about learning that?
Well, you got to expose yourself to everything and everybody. I mean, we're all United States citizens. I mean, we all come here. Everyone's come here from somewhere else except for the American Indians, right? So, I mean, we're all American citizens. And, I mean, for all of us here really on this line, I mean, we're all out in the street, we're talking to people, we're doing things. I mean, my wife's a federal worker, and just speaking with her the last 2.5 months, she really hasn't been out that much, on the street like we are, and really have a finger on the pulse of what's happening. Now, I definitely believe in diversity, and what I've done in the past, and this is for other owners, is you hire people and then you got to put them in your system, and then they get into the payroll and they get everything else like that. And then you find out 2 or 3 weeks later, they don't want to work, or they're not showing up every day. They're not hungry. And this doesn't matter who anybody is, right? It could be for anybody. So a lot of times what we'll do for the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that, we'll pay them on a 1099. So we don't have the trouble and the expense of hiring them full time. And we'll just bring them in and we tell them that on the interview, and we'll pay them in a 1099, which they generally like because they get more money. They don't realize they're going to have to pay taxes, or they do, but that, generally that washes out in the course of the year. But we'll pay them on a 1099 and then see how they do. Right. Yeah. And then hire them after that.
So I think that's
legal or not, but I mean, that's what we do.
That's my next comment. So that's a creative solution, but I am 100% certain that the IRS doesn't support that. 100% certain of that. So we'll pretend
it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, right?
We'll pretend that this isn't on tape, and I didn't say that to you.
If you don't post this one.
So you were posing that as a hypothetical. So I understand.
You better edit that out before we go on YouTube.
Sorry, we're live streaming right now.
I think what Dan, I understand where you're going with that. I think his question is more along the lines of, how do we understand where the people who are out on the streets and on the front lines of what's going on, how do we understand their opinions and where they're coming from?
Right. That's what I meant. That's exactly right, Eric.
And I think what Dan, his first comment saying is creating exposure. I think being and seeing a lot of people out there, and for him, I understand the American citizen thing, but I even take it even farther than that. I see everybody as an equal, whether you're from America or you're from the Middle East or you're from China or you're from Russia or you're from Lithuania. It doesn't matter. You're an equal to me. I'm not better than you. You're not better than me. I like to see it that way. And I grew up in Baltimore City. I was born and raised there. I've seen things. I've watched the city grow. I've watched the city rise. I've watched the city fall, especially during the Baltimore City riots. And, so I think, I have friends of all races, religions. I have friends from different countries, and I respect every single one of them. And each and every one of them have had different upbringings and different challenges being the type of race they are, whether they're African American, they're Indian, or from the Middle East, or they're from North Korea, South Korea. It doesn't matter. They all have had their own types of challenges. And I think the biggest thing is just be interested. Listen to them, understand those challenges. And I think creating, like Dan said, creating that exposure and understanding those things is, I think, the most important thing. These people, now I will say, the people who are looting and burning and stuff, they're just taking advantage of the situation. But then you have your groups of peaceful protesters who just want to be heard. And I think that's the most important, creating that exposure for yourself to go out there and hear them.
Sorry, I'm having trouble.
Sorry, my watch is going off. Hear what they're saying and understand their side. There's always sides to a story, and that's what I think. That's me personally.
Yeah, so I want to respond to that a little bit. And so much of that I agree with, but there's also a dangerous blind spot that we all have, that we tend to fall into, and that is by I'll just use me. By me being a good person and being open and empathetic and ready to listen to anyone, then that's, by golly, that's what I need to do, and that's all I can do. And my answer is no. That's not enough. That's not how you learn physics or plumbing or electrical or anything else. And as a leader, I believe I have an obligation to try to figure out what I don't know about another culture or race or class or whatever. And so I've spent an awful lot of time in recent years on the Latino culture, and a lot less on the African American culture. But where I'm going with this is we got to be careful about saying, and no one said this, but we have to be careful about saying, hey, I'm willing to work with anyone as long as they're willing to work with me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think we need to go deeper than that and understand other cultures, whether it's Lithuanian, that was earlier said, or Irish, or in the bigger piece here, African American. And so I have a list of, surprisingly, I have a list of books that would be useful for anyone on this call who's interested to read about what it means to be an African American in the United States. There's a really healthy list of things. And I remember the first time I read, have you ever anybody heard of Ta-Nehisi Coates? I know Jacob has. Jake, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, the small
yeah
TED Talk. Yeah.
And I remember the first time that I picked up that book, I picked up the book and it pissed me off. It really pissed me off because he was saying a lot of things that I didn't want to hear. And the story is about the lessons that the book is about the lessons that he's teaching to his son. And I remember the first time I started reading, like I said, it was really pissed me off. And so then I set it aside for a while. I remember having an argument, a disagreement with Jacob's wife about this. And so we talked about it and I thought about it. And then I went back and I picked the book up again and I read it again. And I was clearly in a different place when I read it again. The book's called Between the World and Me. That's his first really important book, Between the World and Me. And I read it again. It's a really short book. It's a quick, easy read. And as I read it, I had a lot more empathy for where that was coming from, even though there were still parts of it that made me mad. But I think the reason it made me mad was because I just didn't want to hear it. But what I wanted to hear was how I grew up, which is, hey, everybody's supposed to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. You come in the trade, and I used to say, the statement I used to make as a business owner all the time is, hey, I don't see race, gender, culture, creed. I only see green. Probably many of you on this call, if I encouraged you, would agree with that statement. If you would agree with that statement, you don't know shit about race relations. And I didn't really know shit about race relations, even though as an apprentice in Washington, D.C., half my apprentice class was African American. Because I'm around people doesn't mean I know anything about those people. And so it actually takes a little bit of diligence and effort to learn. And I you know what, on this call right now, I'm looking around the call. On this call right now, we have, I think, 3 women. And then for the most part, I think the rest of it is Caucasian males, which is great. All of us have a little bit of reading. Anybody willing to agree to that? Anybody willing to pretend that if I post?
Yeah, you're right. I think that's
go ahead.
That's one of the things that kind of ticked me off about everything going on is you see a lot of posts on social media and that's going out on the news that, you know, this is what's going on and people voicing their opinions when I don't think they really get what the root cause of it all is about, you know. And I think even all of us on this Zoom meeting here probably lacked more than what we really think about it and want to admit about it, that we don't fully understand everything with the different races and people that are employed or that we work with.
I completely agree with that. I still just looking at posts and listening to what people say, you know, you hear and see so many opinions and hear the anger and the frustration. But as someone who's never had to experience that side of it, I still, and at least I'm trying to understand it, and I still don't completely understand it. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah. There's a meme today. I had an exchange today with a friend of mine. And this friend is someone who's come through. He's about my age, maybe probably right about my same age, maybe a couple years younger. And he works for a really cool company. He's a senior vice president for that company, and he posted a meme today. Someone else had posted, and it says this. It said, "You had my support when the cop murdered him. You lost my support when you did the same to innocent people and burned your own communities to the ground." And so there's a lot of those kinds of memes going around, and I unloaded on them. I completely unloaded. Here's what I wrote. I said, false equivalency, Noel. His name is Noel. Wrong is wrong. None of us have the right to dismiss the wrong of police murder over and over, and over policing over and over. Those in power are tasked with being held to a higher standard. I said, this meme is bullshit. He replied, is by saying this. My biggest issue is we never see protests when a police officer gets gunned down. We never see protests when a white person is killed by a cop. Everyone wants equality, but even the news stations don't even report on it. There are no big demonstrations. There's no charges. 89 police officers were killed last year, 20 unarmed white people, 10 unarmed people of color. I wrote back, Noel, no, not with you on this one. Years, decades, and centuries of abuse. People are fed up. Andy of Mayberry, RFD, was the fictionalized ideal cop, and who I think we all wish we had. The militarization of the police force, the thin blue line, and the complete lack of respect for citizens has led us here. And the racism, the murder, and driving, walking, sitting while black as a crime too. He replied, he didn't reply back to that yet, but I went on with a subsequent post. I said, no, every time a cop is killed, the community mourns, and it does, and it should. Tons of news coverage, hundreds or more officers in uniform at funerals, flags at half staff, cops are publicly honored and mourned. Your comment about, quote, never seeing riots when a white person is killed by a cop really shows an unawareness of the numbers and an apparent lack of understanding of the systemic racism and abuse in policing. And that's worrisome to me, Noel. There's a lot of information, facts, analysis, et cetera, about this. Respectfully, I'll post just a couple. And then I sent him a book list of things that he could consider. And then I also sent him, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wrote a really good op-ed piece in the LA Times on May 30th. And he said back a thank you. And I said, no, love you, man. Always glad to tackle tough topics with you. We make each other better. My point in bringing that up is get back to my earlier point, is we have these false equivalencies. Everyone is opposed to rioting. The rioting and the looting that's going on. I think the sad thing is too often when white people talk about the rioting and looting that's going on, the implication is that it's black people that are doing the rioting and looting. Well, there's certainly plenty of black people doing the rioting and looting, but there's plenty of white people. We call all of those people something. We call them fucking criminals. That's what they are. Protest is okay. And so, but the problem is when we get to this point, it drives us back into those echo chambers that we live in. So I don't know. I think we can do better. I think we have to do better.
So Kirk, I'm looking at the Census Bureau for Iowa and our diversity here, and we're at 85.3% for white alone, 4% African American, 6% Latino or Hispanic. How do we? I know that we are trying to tap into these resources, or trying to tap into finding these people to work for us. With numbers so low, though, how do you bring that into your company?
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good question, Jeremiah, and it's the question, but it's the same question we can talk about when we talk about women or any minority, right? Indiana also has very similar demographics once you get outside of Indianapolis and then the Gary area, right? And so most Midwestern states outside of the cities have that problem. The answer is it has to be intentional. And this is going to sound funny, but we almost have to go out of our way as a company to diversify our company. And no, almost. We have to do something that's harder to diversify our company than otherwise. Now the question is that from a business standpoint, is that worth doing? And I think that's the right question. Yeah, from a business standpoint, is that worth doing? And if so, why? So do you agree, disagree? And if so, why or why not?
Kirk, I have to say, I agree 100%. I just, Jeremiah, along the same lines, I went to the, while you guys were talking, I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the U.S. And what I saw was African American 20 to 24, both men and female, is at 13.4% in the first quarter of 2020. When you scroll down to the age range of 20 to 24, you see that statistic at 14.9%. 16 to 19 is 23.3. So I think we need to start young. When we talk about recruiting, it starts in 7th grade, trying to direct them, or let them know that there's options available in the trades. One thing our organization's been doing, and Mark Terveen can allude to this a little bit more. He actually led the efforts, and he found a group in Dayton, Ohio called the Victory Project. And what it is inner city kids. Most of them don't have a meal at night. They don't have a family dinner. You got parents working 2 jobs. You got one parent working 2 jobs. So what this foundation does is it actually gives them a place to come, and it's people from around the community that can go and help them tutor, offer your time, tutor with their schoolwork during the school year. And then there's companies can actually participate and put on a dinner and engage and develop relationships, and let them know that hey, you have options out here. You got a whole field of opportunities available. Monty, the founder, he actually he wanted to teach them the value of work, right? When you work, you get paid, and so they started their own little landscaping business. So they started with car washes and all sorts of fundraising, and they build up enough money to buy some mowers and start doing some tree trimming and etc. So they go out in the summer. It keeps them off the streets, and they can work and they can see opportunity, right? So I think that's been awesome, and Mark can add to that a little bit later. But the other thing I wanted to say is, I've always been involved in athletics, my whole life, all the way up from 6 years old all the way till 22, 23 years old. And one thing I saw is there is a gap in this country, and it's difficult to see. But what I saw, I grew up in the construction industry. I would bring people along, and they got to, just work alongside us on doing some general labor stuff and put some money in their pocket. And once they saw that, you could see inspiration on a whole new level. So I think that's important, because there's definitely a drastic difference between a life of privilege and the life of underprivileged. And my wife the other night, she said, "You got to watch this." And some of her former teammates from Bowling Green sent this link out, and so I watched the link, and I put that in the chat box. But I do encourage everybody to watch that. It's about a coach, and he lines everybody up on the line, and he goes through a series of questions, and he said, "Whoever wins this race will get this $100 bill." But he continues to ask questions, and he tells them to take 2 steps forward for those that said yes to the answer. And you can see who's left on the line. Mm-hmm. And it's probably 50 so or more people on this line. So I do encourage everybody to watch that, because there is a big difference between privileged and underprivileged.
Yeah, for sure.
I have seen that video, and I agree that's a good video to see that type of diversity. We also have a program that we have. I guess we just recently implemented it. Actually, 2 years ago we implemented it. It's called iJag, and we take kids from all over Iowa that are still in high school, and little less fortunate. They might have a single parent or something along those lines. And we've been bringing them in to do like a mock project. So we'd take them through and they'd estimate the project and they'd create their own company name and go through whatever they're estimating. They would go through and build it. And then at the end, we'd show them what exactly happened with the profit and all of that. And we got a lot of great feedback from the students on doing that. And I think it's been a really good indicator for our company on when they look at things like that. They'll remember stuff like that. I think they will.
Yeah. Jacob, you were going to say something.
I was, and I've lost track of that thought. So we'll circle back if it comes to me.
All right. So another thought I want to put in everybody's head, as far as, again, thinking about thriving, is that I'm a big believer that, my definition, how do you become wealthy? You solve other people's problems. And so I think this is a great industry. I don't know if any of you have ever helped anyone else to start a company in this industry, but I have. And I've done it a fair number of times. And I've done it, one, to help, but two, because it was a good business opportunity for me. So I'll give you an example. The first time that happened. The time it happened is I was, running my business on the West Coast, and I was one of the major insulators that I had was a major insulator in the region. And they just pissed me off. I didn't like their pricing sucked, their performance sucked, everything pretty much sucked about them. But they felt like they were, they dominated the marketplace in Southern California, and they kind of did. And I finally said, "Oh, the hell with this! You know what? I'm gonna create my own insulator." And so I found I knew someone who worked for that company, who had been sending all the signals that he wanted to start his own business. And so his name is Tom. And so I said, "Hey, Tom, you ready to start your own business?" He said, "Yeah, I'm ready." He says, "My heart and my soul is ready." He said, "I don't know if I'm ready," but he said, "Yeah, I'd love to do that." And the good thing about an insulation business is the startup costs are very low. What do you need? You need a knife, you need a roll of wire, you need a roll of tape, and you need a roll of insulation, right? It's not freaking rocket science. And so very low capital startup kind of thing. And so to make a long story short, I put them into business. Now, how do you put somebody into business?
Hoping to find their business plan. How are they going to make money?
And that's more complicated. I wasn't that complicated back then.
You gave them the startup money.
You give them a freaking job, right? Startup money comes in the form of you give them a freaking job. I had Job X that had, I don't know, $200,000 budget for insulation. I knew that's how much I was going to pay for insulation on the job. The guy had the ability to do it. I knew he had the field ability to do it. I knew he probably was lacking in the office abilities to do things. And so he did what he normally would have done for me, which is insulate my freaking job. And I helped to teach him along the way, trial by fire, about cash flow and billings and lien releases and contracts and all those kinds of things. And so all it really took was a little bit of mentoring. And so I put this guy in business. How do you think that worked out?
Really well, probably a better price.
Good. Well, but I wasn't going to pay him. I wasn't going to lowball him, right? I know I know the purpose of estimating is to identify your true cost. Is I knew I was going to pay for insulation, and so I gave him what he should get for the insulation job, and he made a fair profit. And then it continued and continued, and he grew more customers, and he grew more adept in the business. And so what happened? To make a long story short, what happened is he felt indebted to me. He wasn't indebted to me, but he felt indebted to me, and I got great pricing and service. And if I needed something in the middle of the night from an installation standpoint, he was there. And it continued a friendship and a relationship. And what did it cost me? It cost me nothing. It cost me a little bit of time. So that's one example of thriving. Is if you don't like who you're working with, create new people to work with. So that's one example. Another thing that another experience that I had that I'd recommend to all of you is I believe that by seeding companies, SEED, right? Seeding companies in your marketplaces, especially when we go back now to the discussion about diversity, I think that that's good for the community, period. I think it's good for the industry, and I think it's good for me. So what I did about 5 or 6 years ago is with a couple of other people, I started a entrepreneurship program in inner city Indianapolis, where we were going to seed companies. And so there were not enough local construction companies in inner city Indianapolis to do a lot of the small remodel jobs and small government jobs and those kinds of things. And so what happened was the larger out of town contractors would come in and they dominated that work. And I didn't think that was a particularly good idea. So what we did was we decided to come up with a model. And in the end, what we did was our model was who are the stalwarts in an African American inner city community? Well, they're the women of faith, is what they are. That's what we learned by working with the community development organizations and the churches and things like that. So what we did was we interviewed we put the word out, and we interviewed a whole bunch of solid women of faith solid in their churches, recommended by their pastors and so forth. And then what we did is we decided to approach the prison system. And of course, the problem with people coming out of prison is they end up going right back in because they can't get jobs. They can't get work other than pizza delivery and those kinds of things. Anyway, make a long story short, we had 2 pools of people. One was African American women, faith-based in the community. And in this case, it was women, mostly African American, coming out of the prison systems for whatever reasons. And then we created a 16-week program that they had to be interviewed to get into this program. They couldn't miss a class, just like your apprentice classes. Really, they couldn't miss a class. They had a small financial commitment, which was subsidized. They had to participate, and then the classes were in accounting, in estimating, in HR, in taxes, in how to get government work, those kinds of things. And so we interviewed about 100 people, about 100 women, and we ended up picking 24. And so we picked 12 women who were faith-based, stalwarts of their community who were interested in this, and then 12 women who were coming out of prison. And we created 12 companies. And we forced them together, and we helped them to get a business license and create a business plan and all those kinds of things. And we did that. And not all 12 companies made it, but more than half of them made it. And so now we've got 7 or 8 small, the first year, 7 or 8 small community-run businesses, so they weren't competing with me. And then we did that again another year, and then again a third year. And so this goes all the way back to the comment about, if we have low demographics, how do we change that? Well, maybe that's one of the ways to change it. So, Jeremiah, are you in Ames?
Yeah, Ames, Iowa.
Yeah, and so that's a thought. I don't know how big Ames is, but that's a thought. Is a similar approach to seeding businesses. And then what happens, of course, is in these companies that we formed, they were African American women, and they hired African American, mostly men, to work for them. So now we had women-owned businesses, and we also have minority business enterprises, and hiring more, especially at the time, young African American men. And it worked. Now, of course, once they get some skills, right? So this is a jab at Hanco. And so they were really small general contractors, which means, general contractors, they don't have a lot of skills, right? You're kind of jack of all trades, and they couldn't be electricians or mechanical. But then once they started to get some skills, then we could start to move some of them into some of the more skilled trades, right, Nick? And anyway, so it's a thought. So give me some thoughts on that, on and how you receive that. Could you start businesses or help to start businesses in your community that would that are minority businesses that would help you in all kinds of ways, right? If you're chasing government work and you have a minority insulator as an example, that's good. That gives you a competitive advantage and so forth. And then the idea being that over time, plumber sees plumber, carpenter sees carpenter, and all that kind of stuff. And so, is that a longer term way of maybe increasing diversity in our industry? What are your thoughts?
I think probably, because I see we do a community outreach program too, which it sounds like a lot of companies do. I think one of the pitfalls there is you tend to show up with a group of 6 white guys in a diverse neighborhood, and they don't see that themselves being us in the future. And I think you kind of hit it on the head when you put a community leader that they already respect in that position and build from there and show success that way. So that's definitely different than our approach, and something I'm going to consider and relay back.
I think that's a great comment because, you know, he's in Oakland. 6 white guys showing up in Oakland to say, hey, come and work for us. We'll give you an opportunity. It starts to feel a lot like plantation shit, right? So, I don't know what the rest of y'all think. Tyler, you're laughing. What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, I actually started to think about what if, I mean, we got a good group of people here. We got some ownership. We got some leaders in the industry. I personally don't know of anybody, but you know, one thought would be somebody does know, you know, an African American in a leadership role or a business role, or you know, maybe our next step in this group would be getting them on the call and having a collaborative discussion, you know, to see, you know, what we can do and what they suggest, you know, as far as helping out and reaching out to the communities. What are their thoughts and their ideas? I'm thinking it's like, okay, we got, you know, 20 white guys right now discussing this, so it's like, let's get some other thoughts and opinions, you know, from that community.
That's a great idea, Tyler. I love that idea. I wrote it down. That's a great next step. Is that what if we had the same group or similar group here, but then half of the group was African American and Latino or women or whatever. That's a great idea. Man, out of Denver, Tyler scores. He's on the board. All right. Well, I want to show you. I'll show you my response to Jeremiah's question. So let me share that with you. And I don't know that I don't think it was in a dark place, but it wasn't an overwhelmingly positive, uplifting response. And so, here's Jeremiah's email. It says, for the past week, ever since a series of unfortunate events in Minnesota and throughout the nation, I've been expecting to see the market plummet. There's so much turmoil in our nation. I can't fathom having people have decided to pump money in investments. However, as I sit here looking at the stock market, for the 3rd straight day, it's continued to climb. How's this even possible? Although America has become opening its doors from the pandemic, people are undoubtedly still hurting from the past 4 months of layoffs, unemployment. One would think the last thing on their mind would be investing. With the pandemic, quote, on hold, as people continue to protest, will the past 4 months of isolation have been for nothing? I'm imagining in 2 weeks, we'll see a huge influx of people rushing to the hospital, only to be met with lack of beds and respirators. Everyone is fearful of a second wave, and this will no doubt amplify the number of cases and in turn cause another nationwide shutdown. So as I'm thinking about everything as a whole and applying to business, what should I be preparing for? The stock market is showing me that the money is still there and business is looking good. A nationwide civil unrest is showing me that the economy should be hurting, and it appears to be doing well. And the pandemic is showing me signs that this virus is far from done. All the signs seem to be pointing in the direction of a downward market, yet all I see are green uptrends. Even looking at it with a 3-month vantage point, markets are trending up. A lot of companies made some bold moves early on by downsizing and tightening their financial reins. Have they been holding tight long enough to think they're in the clear and begin spending again? I can't see people wanting to begin construction now. What am I missing here? And so that was his email, and it was a really well-written email. I liked it a lot. Here was my reply. Jeremiah, lots of institutional investing happening, and that's true. And yes, downsizing has been good for large corporations. 42.6 million fewer workers to pay, with trillions of stimulus money, makes shareholders very happy. And sadly, that's true. Of course, the problem is insurrection in the streets. Reminds me a lot of the times of the French Revolution. Keep your powder dry. I suspect a second wave will be larger now as a result of all of this, and I'm not sure the stock market will care. Then I make the comment about the 209 million and 20 million out of work, and so forth. Riots, unrest, military in the streets can't be good for business in the long run. On the other hand, contractors typically benefit after disasters during the rebuilding process. A big problem is going to be in government spending. State, local, and municipal governments will have to dramatically curtail their building plans. The feds will only be able to build by printing money. I suspect the private development will be cautious. Manufacturing may have an uptick. What are y'all's thoughts about my response? So we all look at each other. No one has any thoughts. Huh?
This is Mark, Kurt.
Hi, Mark.
I think you're spot on in a lot of different things. I mean, it's bewildering how this stuff has happened. You know, it's almost like COVID was going away, things were opening up, and now we've got the latest disaster. So what's the disaster after that calms down?
Yeah.
Because too, the other thing that's happened since COVID, when's the last time you heard of a mass shooting? You know, no one's in school, so it's a little hard to have a school shooting, I guess.
Yeah.
But I was in a budget meeting today, and someone made the comment, another mentor, and actually the owner of our company made it as well. They don't understand, one, why the stock market is going up so high. But in the same venue, they understand things like recreational vehicles are on the uptick. People are buying these side-by-sides, they're buying boats, they're buying motorcycles. And one vendor that I talked to in one of those trades said, it's been the best 2 months he's had in a long time. He doesn't understand why, doesn't figure out why. So it's who knows? And I think earlier I heard you say, anyway, you didn't have a crystal ball to figure this out or figure that out.
Right.
If you did, you'd be a mighty more important man than you already are.
Well, you know, and I appreciate the comment. My fear, that's why I made the comment to Jeremiah about the French Revolution. This worries me a lot, right? Is if you have 42 million people unemployed, but those that do have money are spending, that's good. We need to spend money in order to keep in order to make the economy go. But we're also seeing part of so you have to look at catalysts, right? So the murder in Minneapolis was a catalyst, but I'm fearful that it's not the only catalyst. I'm fearful that the have-nots are really starting to understand that they have not, and that could be a systemic problem that lasts more than just a couple of weeks. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think there's definitely a bit of that going on, especially with stimulus money going out and people realizing that maybe they were getting paid what is now been decided by the government to be less than what is equitable to live on. And so that's kind of the first step in realizing your situation in place. And I could see people for sure becoming more uncomfortable with that and making multiple iterations of this after that. I think part of the reason that the market's going up too, which is everyone and everything that's been said, we're handling it better than the last time. And part of the reason we're handling that better is we got cash in everyone's hands and asked them to spend it. As you alluded to earlier, you know, it's a spender's economy. What is curious about that though is, you know, we're spending without producing, so there should be a catch up there at some point.
Yeah, that's
I don't think people are keeping that in mind. So I think the picture probably looks a little better right now than it will. And so there's a little more positive sentiment around it all. But I think when that fades and that catches up with us, I think we'll probably see a second incident related to inequality generally, and more on a, I don't know, fiscal level, I guess, than just the race level.
Yeah, no, I think that's the comments. Well, when I said the have-nots, I was really focused on the economic piece, right? There's a lot of have-nots, right? I think your comment's spot on as far as, people are spending money, which is good, but we're not producing, so we'll see. So more than we'll see. The question is what's the business strategy, right? One of the things I've always said kind of flippantly. And so I have to rethink that, but it's based on an actual experience of mine. And so one of the things I've always said a little flippantly is, as a contractor, I'm kind of a big fan of natural disasters and things like fires and earthquakes and things like that. When you take away people getting hurt, physical, right? So it's when human beings getting hurt. But as it turns out, one of my most profitable jobs I built ever was the mall in Santa Monica back in the 80s, right on the Strand. And then we were literally in punch list, and an arson torched it, and the whole damn thing burnt down. And then the insurance companies hired all of the contractors who had built the project to rebuild the project, and I made a freaking killing. And so there will be some rebuilding that is happening now for all the wrong reasons. And so certainly there will be a little stimulus from that. So on that note, it might make sense to to stay close to your insurance brokers and things like that to see if there's that kind of work. I think that's going to be a short-term situation. Yeah, I don't think the civil unrest part is behind us, and I sadly think that we may see a new blossoming of it in November, right? Regardless of the outcome of the election, we may see reblossoming of civil unrest in some fashion, and so that could be a business disruption. So let's move to Dan, and so I don't know, Dan's back on. Let's move to Dan, and I'd asked everybody to take a look at the things that Dan had provided, and to give your 3 minutes on how Dan should approach his customer and getting whole, and those kind of things. So I'm gonna actually call on you. I haven't done that in this as a group, and so what I'm really looking for right now is just your 2 or 3 minutes or whatever it is, but 2 or 3 minutes advice to Dan. We're going to come back later on to your parting 5 minutes on surviving and thriving. So Brad Bradley, tell Dan, give Dan your best advice on how he should approach restarting this job and get money back.
One of the first things that I noticed was on the job costing. Looking at the job costing, I was confused. There's a lot of cost, obviously not costed the way it was estimated. That was probably my biggest thing. So at first, I can't even figure out, where did we lose at? That was my biggest take on that.
Right. Were there any particular, I saw the same thing and I have some comments on it, but any particular cost codes that jumped out at you, or things that you could make some reasonable hypotheses about why that was going on?
Just that it seemed like equipment was put in one code and then charged to another. So is it just a training error to where the project manager is not costing the stuff correctly, or what's going on there?
You want to respond to that, Dan? I saw the same thing. So in the original budget, there was $586,000 in equipment, and then when it got accounted for, when it got charged the job, it got accounted under a material cost code instead of the equipment cost.
We had an atrocious project manager at that time. And I have in my SOPs, and I didn't follow, where the foreman come in every couple weeks and go over the jobs with the project manager. And we were buried and a little short staffed, and we weren't staying on top of that. And if we had, then it would have been a different story, I feel.
Dan, you look different on camera.
I'm hoping that we can.
You look a lot better, Dan.
I'm going to go this way all the time, I guess.
I'm hoping we can change that process. I know that without changing it completely where we're at now, I think we're great with how we come in every 2 weeks with our superintendents and we sit down and we go over costs. I love that. That is one thing I actually look forward to, every 2 weeks is going off that over that cost report. But at the same time, like you said, the previous project manager really just didn't put money where it was supposed to. And like you said, the cost report should almost match the estimate. I'm sorry if you get feedback. Let me move my laptop. The cost report should almost match your estimate. You should know where your money is going specifically.
I think we get feedback from you, Dan. You've got two screens open.
Yeah, Dan, I think you might need to mute real quick. Sorry. All right. So, when I review the cost reports for the projects, Dan, I think you need to be muted.
Oh, hang on.
Go ahead, Eric. I think you're
anyway. So
sorry, guys.
I had gotten projects that were already in process. There were budgets and the cost reports that were already developed. So at this point, when I review my cost reports for the projects that are in progress and that I've inherited, I would say, I leave everything the way it is because I want to see where the mistakes were made, where the busts were, where the money wasn't. I want to see that moving forward so that we can change it in the future for different things. And I think at this point, I think we're doing great. Like I said, I come from a general contractor who I've worked all over the world. I've done a lot of projects. I've done projects up to $300 million. And it's been an adjustment coming to a small business, but being home was important to me. Anywho, so I from a financial standpoint, I can see things differently coming from a general contractor and then working for a sub, but I like to keep, he's got his processes, SOPs and protocols that need to stay in place and that's a Clover thing. We just need to make adjustments to them. And we need to perfect them, and we just need to get it right. And I completely agree with Brad's, evaluation of that. It does not match, and it won't. And unfortunately, it's going to stay that way because that's how we're going to have to continue to track the project because it's been tracked like that from the beginning.
Right.
Yeah, I would offer too, Eric, that maybe look on the expansion of expanding, your codes. Now, I will tell you, we made the mistake probably 3 years ago, maybe 4 now, to where sometimes when we really want to change something, we get really focused on changing it. I think we constantly make the mistake, and I know other companies do, so I only assume everybody on this call does the same thing. When you really put a lot of focus on wanting to make these changes, sometimes we tend to go from the left all the way to the right. Yeah. So I will tell you this. So what we ended up doing, Eric, is we went from 100 task codes, or let's say 75, to 300. So obviously over a couple of years, we found out, these are just as bad as the other ones because now the guys can't make up their mind or know the right code to use because there's so damn many. Yeah. So you really got to find that happy medium. And I would suggest a better breakdown, because the bottom line is, if all you're looking at is the bottom line on the job cost, because you can't really itemize it, you can't use the information, you really can't figure out shit on really what happened and where it happened. And I would just offer a further breakdown. I mean, you guys were using, was it Maxwell, Dan?
Yes, we're using Maxwell.
Okay, so we end up, I'm not suggesting that, the software is the problem. I mean, but I know we changed from Maxwell to GE because it gave us other opportunities too. But and then
GE, Brad? What are you using, Brad? GE?
Well, it's Davisware GE, but there's other, I'm not trying to sell on that software. There's other programs out there just as good, but I would also offer, coming up with a labor productivity measurement. And I mean, you don't have to have a software do that. It's nice if you do, but you can simply, break that down in your own estimate and put an Excel sheet together for every job you do. So you can do that, but that'll give you a little bit more detail, and the proof is always in the pudding, right? So I would say that, and then we've already talked about a little bit on what I quickly reviewed on your job is, come up with and I didn't do it, Dan, but I will do it. I stuck some other stuff on Dropbox today, which hopefully maybe we'll get to later, but I need to put on Dropbox kind of the standard contract language, the stuff that, you should just constantly do a word search, and as soon as those words come up, you read them. If it reads anything like that, it's just a standard. It's quicker, and it might save you some cost on that. I understand, your attorney might only charge you $200 or $300, but you could definitely, however many jobs you're doing a year, if it's 35, I mean, times that by 20, you can save yourself some money. But I'll put that on Dropbox for you, Dan, on some standard contract review language. And Nick come up with a hell of a template as well on that. So we'll share that. But that overall, I mean, I know there's more to it. I didn't spend, the time that I probably would like to spend on it, but for the most part, that was my overall assessment on when I took a quick view at what you put on Dropbox there.
Good. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Dave Boda, you still on with us, Dave?
Yeah, sorry, I'm back.
Okay. Do you have pants on?
Yeah, yes. I just had to wrangle the kids.
What's your take on the journal?
I will apologize. I didn't get to review everything, but one thing I noticed in the PCO 82, I feel like you could have broken down that $8,000 line item a little further. It's just in the other column. I feel like as a GC, they'd probably definitely ask. At least I feel like I'd get asked for a breakdown on that cost.
How did you feel like it felt as far as the cost impacts?
I mean, the overall cost seems pretty minimal to me.
The 8,000, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed really light to me.
Well, and you don't show any inefficiency money either for getting geared back up, and also having to follow the COVID procedures period has caused inefficiency across the board.
Yeah.
I felt like that could have been broken down a little bit better. You might have some more success getting that pushed through.
Okay.
They actually asked for a breakdown on that via email after it was sent. And then kind of evaluating it and looking at it, I basically, I probably could have definitely looked at it from an inefficiency standpoint, and, with COVID processes. I looked at it as, I took our initial mode charges and I kind of just buffed it a little bit and did it that way. But, really thinking about the situation and, the fact that we had to move staff to other projects, and now they're on other projects, and now we got to figure out how to restaff that project, which,
right.
It's just, I definitely could have thought about that a little more. And I can definitely say that it definitely needed to be a little more. And honestly, our PCO process too, could be adjusted. Like you said, I think we need to provide more of a breakdown on the costs. Like, we have our PCO sheets that have the formulas that calculate all the money, which is great. But I think in terms of the information that's provided, to provide a breakdown sheet of exactly what and where we're seeing why is it I'm charging you $8,000? Okay, I got this guy, this is coming here. The equipment's got to be brought back, so on and so forth. I definitely agree with that. Even if it's just in the cover sheet with the description and the scope of work, it'd definitely be a lot better. I will agree.
Okay, good. Thank you. Dustin, what insights and advice do you have?
Good evening. So I'll try not to play the repeat game. I did notice on the PCO 82, you said you listed an addition of 0 days on the project schedule. And that caught my eye. So I went back to your original project schedule, and outside of, I think it was phases 1 and 2. No, it was, which one? The procurement phase, and right into level B, phases 1 and 2. Your original project schedule is already in the red. So, I mean, that right there, whoever your general contractor is putting this together is already putting you in a hole. And then if you continue down, you get a little bit of green, and then level A, phase 3, from there down, all MEP rough-in is in the red. So that's not allowing you any opportunities for, any issues that arise, manpower that you got to relocate for a project where you have issues. We do our, update our manpower projections based on our 2-week look aheads. And Kirk, that's one of the reasons I asked you as last week or the week before about how the 2-week look ahead plays into contractual obligations. And I took a snippet and I don't remember exactly where I got it, but it says the 2-week look ahead is a projection of actual work durations from the master schedule and as such are binding. So that verbiage was listed.
Yeah,
Yes.
So here's I'm glad you looked at that. So here's the issue. We all have a master project schedule, and if you signed a well-written contract, by well-written I mean one that is fair to both sides, then you both are mutually agreeing to that schedule. Okay, so far we're all good. The snippet that you just read, Dustin, is also correct, but it's only correct when the snippet that they're pulling out matches the contractual schedule that you've signed, that you've agreed to, right? But that's not what happens, right? So let's just say, for example, I've got a project and it's a 12-month project, and I'm supposed to be roughing in mains on the 4th floor for the first 2 weeks of November. And so when I agreed to the project schedule, you could take the whole project schedule and you could break it down into 26 2-week schedules. Well, if you did that, that's binding. The problem is, and again, this might count of general contractors, but the problem is with general contractors, what they use the 2-week schedule to do is to fix any of their fuck ups and or to accelerate the schedule however they want to. And then they just publish a 2-week schedule that no longer has any connection or linkage whatsoever to the master schedule and try to get you to believe that you're contractually bound to it. That's not a true statement. So a 2-week schedule is supposed to be, if you can imagine, it's an expansion of the master plan. So we get the whole master plan for this 12-month job, and in the first 2 weeks of November, these 40 things were supposed to happen, or these 100 things were supposed to happen. So we're supposed to blow that up. Well, then yes, you're bound to it contractually. That's never what happens. And everybody here knows that's never what happens. Does that help?
Yeah, that helped me for sure.
Yeah.
I hope that helped Dan too. Back to I do agree that the cost code, that there are some, I think, coding errors or miscoding. One of the ones that drew my attention was code 20,000 for supervision. Dan, what is included in that code?
Eric or Dan?
Sorry, guys. So that's our foreman's time that he's just managing the job. So that's like non-productive labor.
Yep.
And that's just our foreman's time.
Yeah, so it's not
And
project
you had
management, it's just foreman. Go ahead, Dustin, I'm sorry.
You had a single foreman for this project?
We had two foremen, plumbing and mechanical, but on each project, we have a foreman and a lead.
Okay, so that was I'm glad you said plumbing, because plumbing, I saw you listed as a subcontractor, but you were over budget on your subcontractors. And I was also interested why you had a sub that was over budget.
But it's probably change orders that weren't approved.
Okay.
At that time. We've been getting a lot of change orders in because that letter that Kirk mentioned for us to send in and Eric did, a lot more change orders have been coming in since we sent that out.
That's good. Okay. All right, good. Anything else, Dustin?
No, I won't take up everybody
All right.
else's time. I'm sure they got some different type questions.
All right, thanks. Let's go to Mark. Let's get a CFO view.
Microphone first. Turn on my microphone first.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I was not able to study the topic at all.
Okay.
And for business reasons, and so I apologize. I have no input.
All right. no
Other
worries.
than I agree with the input I'm hearing, and I'm not selling GE either, like Brad wasn't, but switching softwares did open our abilities for a lot of other capabilities that we had always talked about, but our old system just couldn't do it. And he is absolutely right. Our pendulum was all the way to the left. We swung it all the way to the right. Now we're kind of getting it right back into the middle, concentrating on things that have the biggest impact for our company.
Good. All right, good. Thanks, Mark.
Mhm.
Nick Davis.
Sorry about that, guys. A couple notes I made was I think Brad and Dustin and Dave were right on line. My question was any supervision charged during the shutdown?
No.
Okay, so you put
We
them
haven't
on.
we haven't gotten to that yet. When everything shut down, we got put out. To be honest with you, we haven't submitted anything else except for the letter that Kirk told us to put out. So we haven't anything out there. And I mean, the other thing I want to mention, well, first thing I want to say, man, I can't thank you guys enough for this feedback. And you're certainly not hurt my feelings in any way, shape, or form. And it's freaking fantastic. And it's really great. But after we were pulled out, everyone was pulled out, then we haven't really done anything else with the job. We haven't addressed it. We've been kind of keeping a low profile, to be honest with you. Eric and I have spoken about it. We want to listen and learn from you guys, and then they're trying to get us to come back the 22nd of June. And so we'll take something from this and then we're going to act on it, right, from there. And one of the things that I put out and Eric addressed as well is that, what's the schedule, what's the phasing, and really most importantly, what's the safety plan? Because it's an occupied nursing home. And some of the work that we're doing is it's both. So we're tied in now. So I'm real concerned about my men. I mean, real concerned. We've been working on we do a fair bit of base building work, and probably a lion's share of our work. And we've been working out in the field, and we haven't had any problems. And we're doing some other work with the
same contractor, and a couple of them are assisted livings, and but they're ground up, and we got to do the social distancing and stuff like that. But those jobs have not stopped. So, and I'm not concerned there. I'm gonna be honest with you. If we're out, in open air, right, and I'm concerned about safety as I am in an occupied building, and then on top of that, it's an occupied assisted living.
Yeah.
So
I agree 100%, and that's exactly my point. So you stopped, you pulled out. You're telling me nothing else was charged, but PCO 82. In my mind, there's cost to make sure everything's secured before you demobilize, right? And then when you go to remobilize, there's also costs associated with that because the plan needs to be developed, material needs to be inventoried, plan needs to be developed. Manpower schedule. I mean, the whole 9 yards. There's planning there that's absolutely critical to assure that costs don't continue to increase when you go to officially remobilize back to the site.
Yeah, Nick, can I jump in real quick? This is Dustin. So with Dan's comment there, you're $92,000 over budget with nothing that is COVID related.
Yeah.
So Eric needs to have a conversation with your foreman and figure something out.
Well, Thorman, and also, and I'm going to come to this when I show my analysis of it too, is that also this is surely a fair amount of this has been because Clover has been following the customer, following the general contractor as they jump around this job and change their plan, as we've all experienced a million times. And a fair amount of it's clear to me from the numbers that a fair amount of I agree with you too, Dustin, is $90,000 of losses or lost productivity. I have no doubt in my mind that a bunch of that has been caused by just plain follow the leader, and what you may not be able to recover that, but you should stop that from moving forward. But even on recovering it, I have some thoughts on that too. So I'll talk more. I'll hit more on that later. But that's a good observation. Other thoughts, Nick?
The other thing I noticed, the subcontractors, I had that noted in job cost today too. Was that, so you're saying you said you paid them change orders before you've been paid or before you received written notification?
We got like emails that approved, proceed, but we without a firm PO, we couldn't bill on it. And our subcontractors, we've got good relationships with them. We've been working with them for a while. They run pretty lean, and I don't like leaving them hanging.
Yeah, so Nick Hanko has this same job cost report, so he can see, and I appreciate what you just said, right? You want to continue to protect the partners, but at the same time, don't you deserve to be protected?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
So that was just that was some of the red flags I had, but yeah, I mean, I would definitely go back for additional days. PCO 82 is 0 days. The schedules don't align, and you're definitely it's a dog and pony show.
With the 0 days, I didn't put days in there only because we haven't had an updated schedule on this project since, God, I think the beginning of the year is the last one that I've seen. I don't know if Dan can attest to that. I got a phone call today from, I guess it's their assistant project manager, and Dan had kind of addressed the email earlier that, hey, we're like he said, we want to get back on site. And I'm like, I asked the same exact questions. I'm like, do you have some type of logistical plan? Do you have some type of phasing plan to, go back in this building? Do you have an updated project schedule? Because then I can then I want a project schedule because then I can take those days and I can put those days and really see and evaluate, how much time was actually lost. But I think what I should have done was taken the 0 out of that and just said maybe to be determined, and the language should have been different there. That definitely should have been different.
So what about when you build your task to complete and you're going through your activities on each level, and you have that as your durations, and you compare that to the latest schedule that you got, so that you can show the gaps, and then take that back to them to have them revise the schedule. They send the schedule. Now you have an opportunity to go back and say, here's our additional cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I plan on doing. Once we get this updated project schedule, which we're supposedly supposed to get within the week. Plus, this is real funny. I've worked with Whiting Turner a lot. I've worked with them.
You said their name.
You guys never told me that. You did. You just answered all my questions right now. You answered all my questions.
I'm so used to saying it. Anyway, I've worked with the general contractor a lot. Their processes, protocols don't change within the company. Their contracts really aren't much. I've worked with them on federal projects. I've worked with them on private projects. You can definitely tell the difference between a private project staff and a public project staff. They're just a little different mindset. Anywho, I just know their game, and I got a phone call from them. I asked those exact questions that I just said, and I shit you not, 20 minutes later, the project manager sent out an email saying that they were going to release that information and that they wanted certain information from us in terms of like who's coming out, and they wanted phone numbers and contact information. So I feel like it took a subcontractor asking the general contractor those questions for them to even consider making a plan and putting a plan in place, because then I saw an email come in after that from another subcontractor who asked the same exact question in response to that email. So I know I'm not the only subcontractor that's asking these questions.
So I like your comment, Eric, but I don't believe for a second that they haven't thought about their phasing and their planning. And I don't believe for a second that they have not considered all of this. And the reason they're not sharing it is about advantage, right? So
yeah, I'm sure they probably have had something drawn up and it's in the works. But I feel like it was just so coincidental. Like, why is it that when I asked the questions, and it's funny as when I asked the questions, the person I was talking to got real hesitant, like he didn't know how to answer them, kind of, it's just, you can tell how somebody's reaction is. And it really surprised me, being who the general contractor is. Those guys usually can cross their T's and dot their I's. And it just, I don't know. I mean, we'll see when it comes out. If it's, I provided our continuity plan, I provided our HAs, I provided all that information. So we'll see how they come up with their plan with the owner. And I guess
my bet would be their projected completion date isn't going to be significantly different than their original projected completion date. And I think everyone's going to be facing this on job. So unless Nick Davis has more, I'm going to switch to Nick Hanko and man, you've been quiet tonight. So I want to hear Nick Hanko's take on this job.
Well, first off, if you would have had what I had for dinner, you would be a little quiet. I got a little heartburn going on.
What'd you have, man?
I had Polo Felice. It is amazing, but you have to come to Wisconsin to get it.
You're a true Spanish aficionado, right?
It's Eau Claire. It's great. Yes.
Okay.
But it's good. So a lot of great comments coming out, which really jars me on how I want to be on this part of it. But and it's awesome to see everybody chiming in and helping Dan and Eric out on this, to really see, the trades working together, and the GCs out there in the conversation, everybody working together here, trying to help someone out in the industry, which in this time, I think we all need to have. So to go along with that, the biggest thing I see is if you go with that PCO, if you sent that to me, you're going to get that email that's saying clarify it. Okay. And you're probably going to send me over a clarification of what that 8,000 really is. And I'm going to hee-haw and ponder through it like most times. But what really is going to get me is that you put the 0 days on it. And if you send me another one that says, well, it's going to be a delay. Oh, no, I agree with your first one. I'll pay you the 8,000. You know, that's fine. That's good. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come at you when you're delaying my schedule, and I'm going to get my $8,000 back plus more, and you're going to be right back at the beginning of this whole situation.
Yep.
And probably paying even more money into me, which is how it tends to go. I would base my delays off of the last schedule that you were given. So no matter if that said you should be finished in XYZ days with a month or 2 month of delay, that's the schedule you put your delays off of. That's the last binding at the time. And that's what you should have went off of. That way it gives me a perspective of saying, oh crap. I closed this job site down for a month. Now I have to deal with another month on my schedule. Probably more apt to talk to you about, all right, I can give you the 8 or the 9 grand, whatever the total is right now. But can we cut your schedule down? Can we negotiate a few things at this point in time? Going back to Kirk's classes, what dictates a contract? Everybody has to be in agreement upon it and understanding. If there's changes, at this point in time, to be honest with you, I don't know. I mean, maybe you just cut your losses and you just take the other road. You know,
I'm not going to make the same recommendation.
I have a question about that.
That's what every GC says.
Well, but that's the thing is, I mean, maybe, you know, all right, if you don't want to play the games, well, then I'm out. Find someone. You throw that out there. What?
Yeah.
If I have you already on a job site and you've done the majority of the work that needs to be done, and all of a sudden you're threatening to leave because I'm not paying you money, you're probably going to start grabbing a little bit of attention and making me think a little bit more. Well, you know, shit, Dan, you know, he has been doing a great job. Okay, I mean, what is he really asking for?
Yeah.
You know?
Dan, for you as a GC, and I'm sorry, Nick, for you, I mean, first of all, I love your comments. And as always, you add so much to this class. I'm pretty sure if I was in your seat, paying them $8,000 and then getting them right on board with whatever I come up with, that's a deal of the century. You agree?
Oh, right. And that's the thing is, I mean, if that's all you're asking for, like I said, especially if you put 0 days in delay, yeah, okay, fine. Here's your 8 grand. Here's your 9 grand. You know, but when it all comes down to it, and all of a sudden the project gets delayed, and you're still in there working, and we're waiting on you. Now I'm going to go back to the contract and be like, Mr. McGuire, do you remember the delay clause that we have in our contract? And you're going to say, no. And I'm like, well, you're 2 weeks short. You're past it. What do you, that's going to cost you XYZ. And all of a sudden that's 8 grand.
Yeah.
So specific, I think,
4 grand.
let me say this. So that PCO, what they asked for was a remobilization charge. It wasn't for a delay. There's no, so there's no, like, they just wanted to know what it would cost for us to remobilize. They didn't ask for, you know, what the delay costs are or anything like that. Now, I guess what you're saying is I should have associated that within that remote charge, because that's what specifically they were asking for in terms of for that PCO specifically was for just a remobilization.
Yeah. It's also though unlikely that they're going to ask you for a delay change. Right?
And I think that letter I sent I did get a response from them. Actually, the project manager finally did about a week later say, we've received a letter. We acknowledging that we've received it. It's an acknowledgement. We see what you're saying. So now with that being said, now I have a basis where I can go back to them and give them a change order for those associated costs, because we've taken those excerpts out of the contract, and basically we're gonna follow that.
Yeah.
Secondly, I have a question, and I feel like maybe that within the minutes that people were talking, when you interpret an agreed upon schedule, me and Dan have gone back and forth on this a couple times, and coming from a general contractor standpoint, there's an agreed upon schedule when you sign a contract, but a schedule to me is a living document. We know it's going to change and adjust and move, correct? I mean, how is that interpreted when you see it that way?
Yeah. So this is an important comment and discussion, Eric. And this is one of the things when I do my foreman's class is that it is the number one reason that foremen suck at 2-week look ahead schedules is they hate doing them, and they're bad at them because they get frustrated because shit always changes, right? And that's why foremen are bad at it, because they don't understand that a schedule is, quote, a living document. That's true from an execution standpoint. That is not true from a contractual standpoint. It's 100% not true from a construction standpoint. Contractually, I'm sorry, from a contractual standpoint, contractually, the way I'm going to sign a contract is we have a mutually agreed upon schedule at the signing of the contract that both parties agree to. Then anything that changes that schedule is compensable, period. Contractually, that's 100% correct. And so both are right. A schedule, what's a schedule? The definition of a schedule is it's a graphical representation of your plan. That's what a schedule is. That's the definition. It's a graphical representation of your plan. So we had a mutually agreed upon plan, and I, as a subcontractor, am ready, willing, and able to live up to that plan and to bear up to the consequences anytime I go out of plan. And that's what Nick was saying. And he should ding me if I'm off the schedule. The other side has to be equally true. When the owner or the general contractor changes the plan, it is always 100% compensable, period. There is no discussion about that at all. What general contractors try to do, though, is say, hey, we're building buildings here. This isn't, they're not building nuclear bombs, and shit happens and weather happens. I don't give a shit, and the law doesn't give a shit either. Period.
Yeah, I would say that was true too. We had to do mediation for one of our projects, and the expert scheduler came in, and a lot of claims were made about emails and kind of informal schedules, and they didn't end up getting to hold any weight, which was ultimately it broke the deal for one side. So
yep. No, that's the truth. The problem is we all are good guys and good gals who want to get it done, and we then start to agree to things we shouldn't be agreed to because of all the bullshit that goes along with construction. You got to go along to get along. I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. No, if I was supposed to have the floor on Monday, the first Monday in November, and then 4 days to rough in all my ductwork, that's when I'm going to get, and that's when I'm going to do it. And just because you poured concrete at an accelerated schedule, and now you want me to start the ductwork on the second week of October, can I do that? I can, if you pay me. Period. And that's how we're supposed to all be doing it. All right, let's Philip, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it or not. Maybe not. Did you have any chance to look at any of this stuff?
So Kirk, let me ask a question there. So if the job is rolling and and the schedule is getting pushed and we're rolling and making money, okay, and so if we're happy, let's just say we are, with the thing being pushed because we're rolling. I mean, I mean, we don't put something out then, or do you put it out there anyway and negotiate it later, or?
Yes, that's exactly what you do. And so that's what the notifications clause in a contract is all about, is that let's say, and I like your example here too, Dan, because one of the things I've always said is I always prefer fast jobs to slow jobs, period, right? I make more money in fast jobs than slow jobs. And so I may choose to accelerate at my own volition if I think it benefits me. And that's okay, because I can choose to do that. But then suddenly that gets internalized by general contractors that I owe them that. I don't owe them that. If I want to go faster because it benefits me to go faster, as long as I'm not fucking up the schedule for other trades, well then no harm, no foul. But regardless, if I'm going to do that, or if the schedule is accelerating, then you have to send out your notification letter that says, hey, notice that you're pouring concrete at a rate of about 3 days faster than originally planned, and therefore, consequentially, the walls are also going to start to go up faster. I may choose from time to time to take advantage of any opportunities for me. However, I am also officially notifying you that there also may be additional cost and time required because of this change of schedule. That's the generic notification letter that you must send. Because what that does is that protects your rights, because later on you're going to find out that it bit you in the ass because you accelerated by adding 2 guys, because for a 3-week period, you had 2 guys freed up from another job. But now after 3 weeks of doing that, you send them to another job you have starting up. Well, the general contractor's still going to expect you to have those 6 guys there and keep up with his job. And now you believe you're screwed. Well, you probably are screwed if you didn't send a notification letter.
That makes sense. I can see what you're saying there. So basically, we bid a job saying, okay, just as an example, we got 4 guys to meet your schedule. We're going to supply you 4 guys for this. All of a sudden, like you said, they're 3 weeks ahead on something, or a couple days or a week ahead. Now I have to give you 4 more guys because you've sped it up. That's an additional cost to us. I can see. Okay.
You are giving the customer extra performance for free. That's not good business. Yeah, period. All right, Tyler, what are your observations do you have on this thing?
Yeah, I don't think that I'll repeat anything here. I was just looking over the contract some more, and that's pretty much what I was gonna say is, reading through this diligent performance clause here in Article 4. I would just say moving forward, that you guys are sending those notices, that you guys are putting them on notice for any delays or anything like that. I mean, this thing looks like a real tough son of a bitch here. That Article B, to the fullest extent permitted by applicable law, contractor shall have the right at any time to delay or suspend the work or any part thereof without incurring liability therefore. Anyways, it seems like a tough contract that's executed there. But it does go on to say, I would encourage a couple things. And I don't know what your relationship with these guys are right now. If you guys are butting heads, if this is a really ugly discussion between you and the GC, which we don't know their name, and it's not on the pay app or anything. But depending on what that relationship or that feel is, they do talk about, working with them on the schedule. So I'd say when you get that schedule, make sure that you guys respond to that, in some bit of a collaborative way, in making sure that new schedule that they issue is something that you guys are comfortable with, you guys are giving feedback to, and trying to work it out in that sense. I would also say, when you guys get your costs and stuff together, one thing that we do, is we'll just go through like a mock trial or a mock presentation of the change order, and just grab people who don't really know, and then they don't know anything about the job, and then just say, hey, these are our costs. This is how we're explaining them. This is how we're breaking it down. Does it make sense to you? Do you buy into it? You know, can you poke some holes into it and stuff like that? Because I think, you know, from the feeling that I'm getting is this is, you know, it is a tough conversation, or it's going to be a bit of a battle, you know, to get this stuff done. But, you know, so that's my 2 cents on it.
Okay. All right, good. Thanks. And thanks to everybody. So, so we get Jeremiah. Jeremiah, any other additional comments?
I was just thinking about that. I think everyone's touched on some of the topics that I would have touched on there. The schedule looked challenging. The PCO looked a little light, and I think we discussed that about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I think we've touched on pretty much everything I would have talked about.
All right, good. All right, well, thanks to everybody. And so let me pull up, let me share some things, and I'll show you kind of the process I went through. So I'm going to share my screen. And so what's on the screen now is, let me go here first. This was the original data that we had gotten from Dan and Eric. And so this is the original data in the original form that they had it, and except I changed the negative numbers to red and so forth and so on. So this is the way we all got it. I'm not crazy at all about the way this data is presented, but as many of you have heard me say, a good manager takes in data from any job, or frankly from any company, and needs to be able to make sense of it, because that's your job as a manager. So I took their data. I don't like it, and what I don't like about it is it actually makes the data analysis difficult, the way it's organized, because when I'm looking especially to diagnose what's going wrong on a project, then I'm really looking for relationships and ratios between labor and material. And the way this information is formatted, it doesn't really lend itself to doing that easily. So the first thing I did a couple of weeks ago is took this data and then I reformatted the data. And I reformatted the data. It's exactly the same data. I didn't change any of the numbers. And this is just for me, but it's also a recommendation to everyone when you're looking at data, is often when you reformat or recast the data, it gets you thinking about things, and it causes you to ask better questions. So one of the action items probably in surviving and thriving is periodically take your data and the way that you see it and turn it upside down and shake it all around and look at it a different perspective to see if maybe it tells you something different. So anyway, so this is the recast data, and so the information on this sheet was projected, actual, and committed, and then there was a variance column, and so I recast that. The other thing that wasn't on that sheet that helped me to do further analysis was to create a variance percentage column, so a delta column. And so that actually started to get me to look at things that I thought were more important, because just the raw numbers weren't as important. So for example, in looking at the screen, the estimated or budgeted projected labor burden originally was 192,000, committed is 0, cost to date's 128, and the variance is 63,000. And so at first glance, when one looks at that, one could make the statement, hey, they're doing really well on their labor burden, as they're almost 33% below their projected cost. Well, that is true numerically. And so, but what you have to do is you have to dig further to see what the heck's going on, because that makes absolutely zero sense. So it's in thinking through the data. So I did that. So now I'm looking in the right in the G column, and so I made the observation there. Drawing reproduction, that's essentially, as estimated, within 4%. Permits, etc. Then we have some things that are a little bit lower in the 90 percentile, and so I don't have much problem with that. Testing is projected at 43%. I don't believe that in an existing building. I don't believe that that's true at all. And also, as we near the end of the job, I also suspect that there's a fair amount of testing left to do. And so I think this number is wrong, and I think the projection is wrong. And so I think that there probably needs to be more money committed to that. But I don't want Dan or Eric to comment yet until I'm done. Got any patching? Okay, maybe that's under budget. Maybe it was overestimated. Not a big deal. Protection, yeah. Cleanup, I don't know. Right now, the budget was $4,000 for cleanup. The actual cost of data is $38.48. No fucking way. With the time that's left on this job, there's no way that budget's not going to be overrun. And so this is an incorrect projection. And so clearly there'll be another, I don't know, $500, $800, $1,000, $1,200 in cleanup. And so this number's wrong. Staging, I don't know. I don't have enough information, but it's close to budget. I'm okay with that. The bond is the bond. Although if the contract dollars have gone up, and they have, by rights, the bond number should go up as well. And this is something that your bonding agent may come back and charge you more money for. Get to supervision, and that's the first category that's dramatically over budget. And so that's at about 200% of the plan. And so there's lots of questions for that. One hypothesis I have in looking at that is it was underestimated, and that's a likely event, especially on a remodel, a phased remodel, as estimators typically tend to estimate supervision using as a percentage of total labor, and that never is going to work in a phased job in an existing building. And supervision should always be a function of schedule and never a function of percentage. So the cost to date, and again, this is another category that's going to go over because as of this cost report, they'd already doubled their supervision, and there's still a bunch of work left to do, and supervision is there till the end of the job. So I also would say that this projection is wrong as well. Change order work. We talked about change orders a little bit last time. I'm not going to talk about it right here because it doesn't materially affect what I'm talking about. Rental equipment's about 50% over, so that's probably an estimating screw up that needs to be fixed. Fire stopping, I don't care. Plumbing sub is about right on budget. And again, I think it was Dustin that talked about it. We should never be over budget on. And Nick too. Should never ever be over a budget on subs. That never makes any sense. Plumbing demolition is about 20% over. Insulation. I was surprised to see insulation over. And it's over by about 24%, which is a lot. 24% of anything is a lot. Domestic water piping, and so this is I think self-perform. I'm going to come to the next sheet. It gives me more analysis, but that's about twice the budget, and so we go. And so there were things that got my attention. I tend to be almost always a labor-focused person first in doing analysis, so that gets me to this sheet, and then the next one I'm going to show you as well. To make a long story short, in looking at this job, Clover does use a lot of subcontractors, and that's what Dan had said before in previous classes, and I have no problem with that. But in analyzing this, as it turns out, the work that we're self-performing as well, we're not doing very well on. And so I highlighted these two, condensate piping and refrigerant piping, because most of the work that's left on the mechanical side that isn't going to be subbed out is in these two categories. In fact, almost all of it is in these two categories. So I went back to look at our performance on condensate piping to see, how we've done to date, because these two categories are what we have the most work left in, and refrigerant is the most work. And so when I look at refrigerant piping, the projected was 31,000, and here I'm looking at labor. The actual was 28,000, so that looks pretty good until you get over here on, they also had a subcontract. So as it turns out, when I look at the actual, we're significantly over budget on refrigerant piping compared to, well, significantly over budget. And then the same is true on condensate. So I'm concerned about the projected cost to complete on these two things. Then when we go to the ductwork, some relatively similar comments. Our original idea was to, it appears to be to self-perform $42,000 worth of ductwork labor. But then we have a subcontract for $55,000 and another one for $22,000. So that's $77,000 worth of duct work, of subbed out duct work, which is again about 70% over budget. So all of those were bright flashing signs that got my attention. So now I'm going to switch to another sheet. So hang on there for a second. Go here. And so then I got into, you don't want. Then I got into thinking about where they were going. So this is on the screen now is their projected this is their plumbing. This is the projected cost to complete on their plumbing. And so they're projecting $70,000 cost to complete on the plumbing. About $26,000 of that is in labor. About $14,000 in supervision. And so that's their cost to complete on that one. Let me pull up the cost to complete on the HVAC. Let me go out of this, sorry. All right, so. All right, so can you all see that? Yes, no?
Yep.
All right, so this is the projection, the cost complete on HVAC, and so it's about $51,000 worth of labor, about 20-some thousand worth of supervision, and you can see all that in their detail. And then on the again on the sheet metal side, they are the plan appears to be to sub that out because they carried it in their subcategory, and they're carrying $66,000 for that sub. There it is, $66,000 for that sub. But it also appears to me that this wasn't quoted out to finish, that this was an internal project manager making the projection, because they've got the numbers for three subcontractors here. And so this looks to me to be a plug number. And the reason I bring that up is that I don't know. Actually, I'm concerned about the numbers, because then when I go into the estimate, so let's go into the detail on the estimate. Let's see, maybe I can pick it up on the recap. Yeah, so looking down on the lower part of the screen on the recap, labor adjustment, materials only, so forth. That's not really where I want to look at. Let's go to, sorry, I'm going to skip around here until I find what I want. Anyway, make a long story short, in looking at both at the plumbing, so now I'll pose a question, but I don't want a long response, but I'll pose the question is if, and I don't want Dan or Eric to answer, if at this point on this job coming back from COVID, if you were the project manager and you were making a projection on cost to complete, and you went in and you estimated what work was left to do, would you factor that estimate or would you not factor that estimate? And when I say, what do I mean when I say factor? Anybody? What does it mean to factor an estimate?
Take a percentage of.
Take a percentage up or 10%, right? So if I'm in a high bay area, I'm going to add a factor because I'm in a high bay area. If I'm running parallel runs, 12 inches underground. Yeah, and so we all know what factoring is. So it's either going to be a 1.1 or 1.2 or 1.5 or 0.85 or whatever. Would you, considering it's a remodel, we're coming back after COVID, the general's going to try to accelerate. If you're going to make a projection on cost to complete, would you factor that estimate?
I think it would depend on
Yes.
the certainty
Yes.
of receiving that cost. I mean, it's all about how you want to show it, right? So if you're not 100% sure you're going to get that, or that you'll have to spend it because you're not doing it,
Yes,
right? But I wouldn't want to project. I guess what I'm saying, I wouldn't want to project an inefficiency. If I thought I could recapture that cost, I'd want to present that and then have the debate there. But yes, generally speaking.
Go ahead.
Someone else.
Kirk, I was going to say you would have to factor that. I would factor all those estimates because you need to count that inefficiency because there has been a time lapse on productivity.
Yeah, so yeah, I agree with you, Philip, and I don't agree at all, Jacob, is that my job as a project manager is to tell the boss, this is an internal projection, right? Not an external projection. My job is to tell my boss the truth. And so if I had, say, 500 hours, if under no COVID, no delay, no whatever, and I had 500 hours, I'm definitely going to factor and say it's going to take me 550 hours or 6 hours, and I would have a basis for that. But there's no way I'm going in saying it's only going to take 500 hours. Plus, since it's a remodel, there has to be a factor, not a remodel. Yeah, it's working, not a remodel, but it's working within a remodel. It's working within an existing structure, and so there absolutely should be, in my opinion, a factor in there for cost complete. So now I've recast the data. It's in front of you now, and so I've recast exactly from Clover's information their estimated cost complete. And so this is the exact same numbers without me changing anything. This is what they sent me. And so materials for HVAC was $10,000. Labor 879 hours at $5,850. Which is $51,000. Equipment labor 16, and you get the idea. Just looking at that got my attention dramatically. Tell me why. Just looking at this. Just looking at this section right here.
You have 57 hours on supervision.
So does that seem high to you or low to you?
Low.
Yeah. I agree that seems low to me. I undoubtedly believe you're going to spend more money on supervision than you think you are. Heck, even if you did the traditional percentage way, traditionally as an industry, when estimators estimate when they're doing it wrong, they use 10% of 5 or 10% of the labor. The track record to date on the job cost to date has been your numbers significantly higher than this. So I don't believe that this number is correct in the projection. I think it's way too optimistic. The other thing that gets my attention greatly is a ratio of labor to materials. And so clearly this is a labor intensive job, or it really is a function probably of most of the materials have been bought to date. That's really what it is. This subs, again, all of this sub is the duct sub, and every indication we have from the cost to date is that you're running over on your duct sub by about 70%. And so and especially since this wasn't estimated by a sub, it was estimated either by a project manager or an estimator, I worry about it. Nonetheless, this is the projected cost to complete and contract to complete from on HVAC, and then the same thing happened here. And so one comment is I think that the projected cost complete are light from the data. And what I mean by that is this is not my feeling. This is by me looking at what was projected versus what was committed in actual. And so I'm skeptical that you're going to be able to complete with these numbers. All right. That said, there were some other observations I didn't make that I should have made, but I did take all of this into consideration. So, for example, somebody raised the issue about the labor burden. Somebody raised the issue about the equipment versus material, and that was a cost coding thing. I made the same adjustment. So, for example, there was a budget item for labor burden that wasn't coded that way. I made that adjustment in what you're going to see next, so that I did consider that. So now getting to what Dan was really wanting to get to, I think, is what do I think he ought to be going after? And so this is there's lots of tweaks that need to be made of this. First of all, is lost productivity, COVID safety requirements. Everyone should be going after that. The loss rate that we have talked about and we've identified across the industry is about 20%. The total hours affected, and so I just using not what I just said a minute ago. I think Clover is going to spend more hours than this. But I didn't adjust for that. And so these 879, 16, and 57, and this, I lumped it all together because they were using the same rate. And so the total hours affected, you can see are highlighted there. And just using Clover's hours, the additional hours because of what I'm calling COVID safety requirements is another 296 hours. And at 5850, that's $17,000. For sure, I'm going after that with my customer, no doubt about it. Now there's maybe some variations. Yes, Philip, it is. It's. I don't have any non-U.S. data right now, but the numbers are clearly in the range of 18 to 20% of losses. So this is where some tweaking may need to happen, and Dan and Eric and I can talk later about extended project overhead. And we did that earlier in this class. We did the calculation on extended overhead. I came up with a rate. I'm not going to pull it up now because of time. I pulled up a rate of project overhead of about $1,000 per day. Now that number may come down, but I don't think it's going to come down a lot because while you have demobilized, you haven't. And so this wasn't a true demobilization. You have still had to keep your head in the game. I'm sure you have still kept things on the job. What you didn't do, you demobilized labor on the job, but you didn't really demobilize. And that's not wrong. It just didn't happen. The additional days when you had those tools, et cetera, sitting there, I figured the 60 days the job has been shut down. Plus, I think you're going to go at least 30 days over the planned completion date in August something. And so I think they owe you about $90,000 there. How that number could change if this number goes to 800, say, then that number is going to be $72,000, whatever. It's a real number nonetheless. You also, your company, your corporate office has not demobilized from the thinking and planning and estimating and those kinds of things. And so again, this is the $300 number I have here. I think is probably close to what is recoverable. I need to know a little bit more, but I know the size of your company. I know the size of this job. And so magnitude of scale, I think that that's probably right. I think that, again, if we use 90 days, that's about $27,000 that I believe that I know I would go after, and I would get a fair portion of that. Another cost that everybody should be going after, and I think I know is 100% valid, is our safety supplies, additional safety supplies. And so I use a rate of $25 a day. You can argue with that. You can argue with the customer on that, whether it's 10 or 15 or 25 or whatever, but I use $25 a day. I think that's a fairly valid number. I put affected crew members 8. Maybe that's 4. I don't know what it is because I don't know those numbers. Additional safety supplies, I put 120 days there. Again, that number can change plus or minus. But again, it's a real number. And so, change this to 4 and change this to 90. You're going to get some magnitude of scale number that's a real number. Additional supervision, and I'm going to show you some means data here in a second, where we used to come up with this. And so additional supervision at a rate of $75 an hour for 120 additional days. And remember, that's the shutdown plus the completion of the job. And so you've got June, July, August. I think you're going to September. And so that means that's 120 days. That's where I came up with that. I think your additional supervision hours per day is going to amount to a minimum of 2 hours a day because of all of the combined things, the scheduling, the jumping around, the extra safety, monitoring your guys, et cetera. And so $120 a day times $75 an hour times 2 days, times 2 hours a day is $18,000. All of these numbers are cost numbers. Learning curve's a real thing. I've got data. I'm going to show you where my source here is. And so I'm going to say on average, you'll have 4 guys a day out there working. I think you're going to have learning curve. You will have learning curve every day. And so the average lost time for the average craft worker is 2.5 hours a day to that. And so that works out to be about $35,000. I have no doubt. I would have no problem demonstrating that. Now, some other things that you should add for that I didn't do because I need more information is you will have additional change order hours. And when you have additional change order hours, you appear to be estimating the cost straight up. And so we know by means that you're going to have a minimum lost productivity on change orders of 10%. So whatever hours you have, let's say you have 100 hours of additional change orders you sell, you're going to have at least 10% lost productivity on that, which then in this case would be $585. You haven't calculated anything as far as financing for loss of cash flow during the shutdown. So if this job had gone as scheduled, you would have had those 2 months of cash flow during those 2 months. You have lost that cash flow, which means you couldn't use that cash to do something else good in your business, and that is compensable. And so it would be the lost cash flow times your rate of financing times your expected ROI. And so that's going to be a real number as well. That's, I don't know, probably going to be $10,000 if I was going to swag it. You also, because this job is going to get pushed out, you also are going to have a delay in your retention recovery. And so that means you are financing that, and that's going to be at least for 30 days. Again, times your cost of money, or it really should be times your expected ROI, which is for me is going to be between 25 to 40%. And so that's going to be on a $2 million job. You're financing $200,000, and so that's going to be a real number. You have additional estimating costs. You have gone back and re-estimated as you should have. And so even if that's only 16 hours at $75 an hour, that's a real cost. You definitely have additional project management costs, both during the shutdown, but also coming up as this job is more management intensive. Cost of revising schedules. And then you also we're going to have extended warranty costs because you have a bunch of work that was put in place. And now this job's probably not going to finish any sooner than a month late. But now they're going to expect you to warrant this thing, and that's additional cost as well. So even with the blanks that I have here, subtotal additional cost, I've got $214,000. You put your 14% overhead on that, and then 10% of profit on that. And so just on a first quick pass without all the information, I think you're getting damage to the tune of somewhere north of $200,000. And then your compensable, in my opinion, is easily in the realm of $270,000. And I know I could make this argument, if I was the project manager, if I was the owner, I know I can make this argument, obviously finish it and do an even finer job of it. Finer by I mean more detail. But that's my thumbnail sketch of where you're at. So now, comments, questions, thoughts.
Well, I'd like to say a couple of things. I apologize. We keep losing power back and forth. So on our cost to complete, what I did is I had my foreman go in with our estimating team, right? And he just traced off the work that was left to do. And we're bidding work, we're busy. I know we should spend more time in it. However, I was realizing that there was going to be insight from what we're having now and trying to get into that. I mean, I could just be doing extra work that I could apply later, but I wanted to give you a general idea what it was. I mean, Eric and I didn't look at supervision. We didn't look at those things. We certainly didn't consider, the COVID costs. And then also, there's also, like I said before, we were working in an occupied nursing home.
Right.
Right. And so, I mean, are they going to give us negative pressure, 30 by 30, area to work in at a time, and then you're really not throwing pipe up in the air and getting it done?
Yeah.
Or work?
Yeah. So what you're really saying, and I agree with you, 20% could be light. Yeah. It absolutely could be light, which means this is why you've got to address this with your customer. Now, the worst possible scenario, and I can already hear them saying, is like, well, if that's going to be a problem, we'll just do it on time and material not to exceed. No one should ever agree to that. That's the worst possible deal for all subcontractors, right? So I wouldn't do that at all. Right?
No, we certainly know better than that. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. So Dan, I didn't do that analysis as a criticism. I did it as to gain insight into what I think you need to go and recover, right?
No, I'm not taking that as a criticism at all from anybody. I mean, this is really good shit, and I really appreciate everyone sharing the knowledge and the camaraderie. And I'm not taking it any other way but positive.
Yeah, good.
Not even a little bit. All right, I don't think that's small. I mean, it's just that's just not the way we that I think about things.
I do have a question.
Back on a couple of things that you mentioned. Okay. Sorry. Well, so the testing, one of the things with testing and cost codes and stuff like that, okay, is that getting the guys in the field go to all the cost codes.
Yeah.
Like when we have underground storm and underground sanitary, it's, and we have exact time. I don't know if anybody knows what that is.
Yeah.
It's freaking great. Where you can track your men, their hours, and to their codes, all right, what they're doing that day. And if anybody wants to know about it, exact time, look it up. It's really good. But what I do with underground, and Eric and I spoke about this, at the end of the day, really, you look at the total underground for storm and the total underground for sanitary, and then you kind of know where you are, because it's off by 15 or 20%. I mean, it just is. Getting your men to do that is really hard thing to do. So, like I said, what you have now is just our costs. We didn't look at our supervision. We didn't estimate COVID. We didn't do anything. So, and your supervision number. So what we do is, our subs have a lower overhead than we do, right? So when we buy out a job, we'll keep some of that burden, and we'll move a little bit of that into supervision.
Sure, because we still have to supervise your subs.
Correct. Exactly right. Exactly right. And the refrigeration piping, that was a bust.
Yeah.
That was a big time bust. Our estimator missed that. It was a 3-pipe system, and I mean, we let him go very shortly after that. And he took it off as a single. I mean, that's a big ass freaking bust right there.
Yeah.
And
so the important thing is how are you? The important part is to get it right moving forward, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what we had there on the sheet metal, because of time constraints and we wanted to get something there, we took an average of some other jobs and just, non-COVID, non-anything, and we did put in a plug number in there for that.
Yeah.
Did I spend an hour and a half or 2 hours reviewing this bid? No.
Yeah.
We didn't.
Yeah. So good. So Eric, go ahead, Eric.
So I'm looking at your cost to complete, basically, and so with the COVID stuff, could we incorporate the material and equipment that we have to provide our guys and our subcontractors, for instance, and it going all the way down to masks,
of course,
and hand sanitizer, and
absolutely,
whatever the case. Could we incorporate that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I have it like under safety supplies. Absolutely. The owner bears the risk of that. The owner should pay for all of that, period. Yeah, no doubt about it. They should pay for all of that. So you have
Yeah.
the material side of it, which is all of your additional PPE, and then you have the lost productivity piece, and all of that's compensable.
Kirk, one other aspect, and it might not apply for the cost of these type of projects, but on a larger scale, sometimes what we do is we will not invoke the force majeure to the client of recovering those PPE supplies. We'll just hold that back for final negotiation on some other matters later.
Yeah. So, but you still identify the cost, right?
Still identify the cost. We still do the cost accounting for that on a separate, like the purchase orders and the contractual work on that. All of that's accounted for, but I won't invoke that until there's something else that I want to negotiate later on for them.
Yeah. So I'm okay with that, because it's, like we've talked about so much, Philip, about negotiation, right? It's all about the beads, right? So it's a negotiation shit, and it's about deciding when to use it, right?
Yes, you're absolutely right.
So, for instance, not just this project, well, what about other active projects we have? Could that be a cost that we can associate with having to provide the extra cost on the PPE that was unexpected?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's and everyone should do that, right? Is that this was not a reasonable or expected cost that you should have anticipated when you estimated those jobs. Therefore, the burden of those additional costs has to be borne by the owner. Period. Yep. So I absolutely would be pursuing that on all my jobs. That's the classic scenario where the owner gets everybody together and says, well, we're all in this together, boys. We're going to suck it up. No, it's not the way contracts work. Nope. So everybody on this call has spent tens of thousands of dollars probably by now on additional PP&E. Yes. Certainly thousands of dollars. Yeah.
Now, something to consider on overseas projects, there's been some country requirements of some certain safety inductions. I don't know on the state side, out of this COVID, there's been anything where owners have put additional training for your crew to and your craft labor to do. I would put those costs in there too. That's what I'm accounting as well on my job.
No, I think it's a good comment. So Dan and Eric, and I guess especially Dan, since I've talked to you more. So are you going to take this? So obviously I'm going to post this. And what I didn't show you, now this is, sorry, I said I was going to and I didn't. So let me pull up one more thing. Stop doing that. So I had mentioned earlier in this class that many years ago, I wrote something. Oh, now I gotta pull it up, sorry. All right, bear with me for a second here. Not it. All right.
As you're bringing this up, would you be willing to negotiate down from those numbers that that you're presenting right now?
So that's a good question. So it's a very important question, because our approach to change order negotiations is, since we don't pad anything, and so since we don't pad anything, that means there isn't much room to negotiate, right? Because once you identify your cost, how can you negotiate down from that, right? So I can negotiate profit percentage down. I can do horse trading and get them to do things for me that if it can help me to defray my cost. But the key here is that the industry approach to change orders, sadly, is, quote, calculate your real cost, then pad the shit out of it, then negotiate down. That's it. That is not the right way to approach this. My job is to identify what my true costs are, and then to appropriately convince my customer to show them where those costs come from, and get them to understand that these are their responsibility and get them to pay for it. So I will negotiate. So for example, on the extended overhead, if I have $400 a month in there for a trailer, and they say, well, it really should only be $375, I'll negotiate on those kinds of things. What I won't negotiate is for the number to go away, right? If they, so Clover has 5850, a rate of 5850 in their estimate. I can't negotiate that. That's their rate. So there's much of it is not negotiable. So, and that's the benefit of not lying, cheating, and stealing. To Dan and Eric, and to everybody really, is I'll put this in Dropbox as well. This is a document I wrote many years ago with a colleague of mine at the Plumbing Industry Council in New York. And those of you who had my project management class will be familiar with it, because this is everything that I talk about when I'm talking about change orders. And I want to show it to, especially in this example, Dan and Eric, because and really to everybody, it addresses the categories of additional costs that you have in the situation that we're talking about. So I'm scrolling to get there, sorry. So so this is a list of mine that's 21 reasons, I think it's 21 or 22 reasons why change orders cost you more work. And now coming onto a job, remobilizing on a job that's been delayed is absolutely a change condition. And so here's the 22 ways they cost you more money. I won't say all of them, but additional management time, redirecting the workforce, incorrect installation based on untimely information, finance costs and extra cash flow, compressed job schedule, extended overhead costs, and I won't say any more, but there's 21, I think 21, and then I also have a brief explanation of why you have each of those costs. Sorry, 22. And then some contractual matters to consider, which I'll skip over for right now. And then as I get further down into this document, how to use all these charts and graphs that I attach and examples of them. And so obviously we don't have time to go into them right now. But then I've got examples for each of these graphs that I put on here. Sorry, scrolling down. And one of the things I talked about is in the future, there you go. In the future, any future changes that happen, and this was the 10% piece on the spreadsheet. This is means figure R2, change order installation efficiency. And so what means says is that any change order work that we do once construction begins is at minimum a loss of 10% efficiency. So just looking at this one line here is if you were at 64% of the day actual installation time with change orders, you will be 10% efficient and less, at a minimum of 10% less efficient. And so I'm going to use this data when I go to negotiate with the customer and show them, hey, this isn't me making this stuff up. This is industry-wide data that says that. This is a curve on materials purchasing. The next one is a curve on efficient ratios of foreman to crew, and you get the idea. So I have a chart and graph that substantiates every single thing that I do when I'm putting, this is a learning curve that I'm putting change orders together. And so I'll go back now to, go ahead.
How recent is that, out of curiosity?
This data is, this data, I don't want to say is universal, Phil, but Philip.
Okay. Is it off the means
Yes.
data? Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And so when I go back, and so now I have to go out of Bluebeam and back to Excel. And when I go back to Excel, if you look over here on cell A51, lost production efficiency change orders means figure R2, that's now tying back to that document. So if you were taking a change order proposal together and negotiating with the client, and they say, well, how do you get that 10% from? Well, I have that 10%. So here's my, and since we don't lie, cheat, and steal, here's my raw estimate for the change order work, just the direct installation work. and then here's additional 10% factor, and that's why you're getting that number. So everything is documented, substantiated. So none of this shit's made up. So, does that make sense, Dan and Eric and everybody?
Yes.
Yes, it does, man. That's freaking really good.
Okay, so I'm going to put all of that in a Dropbox, and so I want to see if Dan or Eric have any more questions on that, and if not, then I'm just going to open the floor. I'm going to start drinking, and we're all going to share how we're going to move forward from here. So think about that while I go.
I tell you what, guys, this is something I'd like to say. You know, it's just the world's changing for everybody, and it's changing for Kirk and PHCC and John and things like that, and how they're going to communicate with us and continue to teach us. You know, I did his project
Oh my God, Dan.
years ago. And,
that
it
was
was
perfect
days,
line.
right? It was days to be in that class, and it was tough taking that much time or giving my men that much time. But I would be up for, you know, let's say on change orders, how to present change orders or something like that to do. I would pay, and I think almost it would be cheap. I would pay for an hour or two class that could bring everybody into the conference room, and we could pay and we could sit down and we could do that class.
Hey, Dan,
Yeah.
you could not have given me the better lead in for what I was already going to do. If you look in the chat box, there's a link to a survey about online training, and it asks questions about format for duration, frequency, pricing, and all of that. So click on that link before you go, fill out that survey. I'm starting with a small group here to, you know, tweak the survey and see the results before I send it to even more people. But yeah, we want to know what will work best for you guys, and we'll merge that with what works best from an educational delivery standpoint and come up with something that works best for everybody.
Dan, I have a question. When you say you like to get more how can I say, knowledge on the change order process, in what way do you feel your company is not capturing all the changes, or
No, I just use that as an example. And then, I mean, we got assistant project managers and things like that who could stand to learn more about it. And, you know, I mean, to be honest with you, the efficiency factor of 10%, I mean, I've never used that, right? And the way Kirk presents it, it's like a freaking matter of fact, what the hell are you talking about, right?
That's because that's exactly how I mean by it. And Philip, as an industry, my goodness, and you know this too, but as an industry, certainly in the U.S., contractors significantly under-collect for their change order work, significantly.
Yeah, it's interesting. In Asia, where I worked at, we were actually tied in with as a bonus to the amount of change orders we hit. In fact, that was the majority of my salary was consisted of that. So obviously, we hit folks with changes, you know, valid changes, of course.
Yeah.
On that, I'm curious if the group has looked at partnering with folks outside of their markets and gone into some of the technological and renewable space as much. If that's an area they want to look at considering. Because I know our company is looking at it, and to be quite candid, and I'm a little bit more critical on these type of things, is if you're going to give a value proposition, you need to ensure that you have the folks that have had proven experience and credible results in that market, rather than say, okay, today we're going to go into this market. Okay, let's get our PowerPoints revved up and go to see clients. Well, looking at that space, what could we do on that as contractors, or what do we need to do with that?
Oh, well, so I'll answer is clearly the foundation and me. It's critically important that we present real world experience, right? And so I know that that's what I do. And so, for example, when we do a change order session, I spend a lot of time on that and bring in examples of how to really truly capture all of your costs, and then how to convincingly present it to the customer, right? It's really important for us in the foundation that we don't have any esoteric theoretical bullshit from PhDs and that kind of stuff, right? It all needs to be real world, but it needs to be real world from profitable companies, right?
Yes.
The problem in our industry, we got such low more profit. The last thing I want, for example, is an owner from Santa Fe, New Mexico, who makes 3% net profit teaching a fucking change order class. Because, why would I want that? So now, if you are a general contractor, you might want that, right?
Yeah.
But I think your point's a good one, Philip. Is that, and I think the piece I really like that I'd like to pull out a little bit more is earlier somebody made the suggestion that we do a diversity a call a class, and I like that. Not a diversity class, but actually have people of diverse group on this kind of thing. So I think that's one idea. I think Philip's idea to build on that is, let's say your strategy was to get into more of industrial markets than you're in right now. Well, then part of the group needs to be somebody who has industrial construction expertise in the group. Yes, and that's kind of what you're talking about, right, Philip?
Yes, yes, definitely. And also the other side I'm talking about, to my surprise, is, and again, I'm not too sure on the infrastructural side as much. And I know many of the companies are Midwest located, which is very nice to hear those cities, because I originally came from those cities. So, how often have you had when you have a general contractor from another country come into that market? Because I know when I worked for the Korean company, they had a hard time finding U.S. Subcontractors, to the point where they looked at that as a risk and did not want to enter that market.
Yeah.
And it's because they can't attend these kind of forums. They don't know who the people are and who the companies are. And I was curious if any of that you guys have explored.
Probably my answer is that for the association, probably that's a relatively untapped area. I like the idea because, as you know, Philip, I worked with Samsung for 10 years, and I think part of the reason I had the luxury to do that is they didn't have the confidence to come into the marketplace of contractors in the U.S. and find them, right? And so I benefited from that. And probably everybody in the association would benefit from that kind of thing. So I like that idea.
The other thing, and again, I apologize my ignorance on this. I've seen it from the other side, where these associations from other countries will come in and see me with contractors. Let's say in northern Spain, that's been an area that was traditionally an area that was a fabrication, specifically vessels and things of that, and carbon steel vessels, stainless steel vessels. And that market has dried up locally in that European construction space. So what they've tried to do is capture some of the U.S. Gulf Coast market, and so they've worked with associations in Spain where they've come and visited me, and they've even done things where where the members, the contractors in that association, will put in a pool of funds, and we'll have someone like myself that's a decision maker, or someone else, go to their fabrication facilities, maybe spend a week in northern Spain and look at what they have and set up some agreements with them. I don't know if that's something that's been explored in the U.S., or because we're so heterogeneous, it might not be a good value proposition here.
Yeah, I think it's worth thinking about. Frankly, I'm sure as an association we haven't thought about that much, but I think it's good insight. So the rest of you, so how are you gonna survive and thrive? What are your parting shots?
Lots of bourbon.
Sure, we got Pat.
Yep. There's been a lot of good things, a lot of comments that have come out that personally have changed a few of my views, which I appreciate everybody's comments and shedding the light from the contractor and trade partner up. And I hope that I can take some of that knowledge that you guys have given and use that to create better relationships with the subs that I tend to work with. I do have a good rapport with the majority of them, but obviously there's the next level that I could probably take with them, and working closer with the owners to continue to grow that relationship. So where work is coming in, I don't have to worry about taking the low guy. I can give them a valid reason of why I'm using Brad, for example, on this project.
You're using Brad?
I know it's tough, but I would have said Dan, but I feel like he's going to come after me with change orders, and I'm kind of nervous. So
he's not afraid of you, Brad. What's that say about you?
Give me another couple of weeks with Kirk, and I'm going to change order the shit out of you.
Exactly. That's what I was afraid of. But
I'll tell you right now, from the very start, any change order you sent me, you're getting it priced at overtime from the very beginning. When you tell me no, I'm going to say, well, now you owe me time and 10%.
Yeah, I know. But even how to really utilize the changes on how COVID has affected the project as a GC, and looking at utilizing that for future change orders down the road, current projects that we have, just use that tool. I mean, everybody has a different way of going about things, and just getting those fine details from one guy, one gal that's on the call that I don't think about daily, but you guys might deal with, or gals might deal with daily. It's truly a great, that's about really all I can say on how I'm looking at. And today's topic of, really trying to integrate our company with the diversity is how to do it, how to handle other companies that have diversity in theirs. I know, Kirk, I always go back to your story about your Hispanic foreman that you hired, and they all left you. And then you sat down with
Yeah.
And then you sat down with the gentleman down there and south of the border. Why they left you?
Yeah.
Just seeing that great cruise of the Latino descent there, and I always remember that, and I'm like, well, I should go and talk to. No, maybe I shouldn't go and talk to. So it's like, well, I'm going to go and talk to the foreman. And, up here, the majority of the foremen are of Caucasian descent. But I still think that that's how they truly see it, is if you're going to talk to anybody, you better talk to the foreman.
Yeah.
So Nick, what I'd like to say is it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning. It goes back to what the riots are about now and what they were prior. It goes to opportunity and showing no prejudice with that opportunity. Put the opportunity out there and let the guys come in. And if they can do it, if they cannot, I don't know how the other owners are, but I mean, traditionally in the course of the year, let's just say, we'll hire, 10 and keep 2 or 3. Right? I mean, that's just kind of the way it rolls. So people come in and then people come out. Everybody's freaking Superman. You're not going to get the reference from anybody who says they suck, right? So you got to just give people the opportunity, and they can do something or not. And then with this COVID thing, and I mean, you've been great. We've been kind of jumping on you because you're on the dark side, right?
Easy, because just to go along with that, I seen Jeremiah about piss himself when earlier called me out on something, and I was like, geez, it wasn't that funny.
But anyway, I mean, for really, for you to start briefing the owners now on COVID, and I don't know how that is gonna, go into the job, right? And we don't really have an impact on that. And the whole industry, the whole world is trying to wrap their mind around it. He already knows that. Right? He already knows that. So it's important for you to bring that up to him. And I'll try to manage that for you. However, it is a reality. So that presents you as the good cop.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so
And,
you know, and then you're like Brad, for example. I mean, Brad, you're freaking awesome, and I appreciate everything that you've done and said throughout this whole thing. But that'll protect Brad, and then Brad will try to figure that out, and maybe the two of you guys collectively will come in and give a good approach. And who do I get my best numbers to? The people that work with me.
Yeah.
People that I have a relationship, the people I
Right.
know aren't
And
going to try to kick my ass.
you're going to see that. I mean, even as being sorry, Nick, but a subcontractor, I mean, there's
Come on, trade partners
that are going to be more receptive for you coming to them with, the COVID changes or explaining that to them. And it's the same thing on my part where if I'm dealing with owners, there's certain owners that are going to be like, yeah, that's legit. I understand completely. I don't know. That's all you're going to charge, but then you're going to end up with the guys that are and gals that are like, no, that has nothing to do with it, but going back to Nick and saying, hey, we're trade partners.
Yeah.
You explain to me on why I need to go to the owner and justify your expense for PPE, for mask and hand sanitizer. Okay. Now we can go in there as a team, which the majority of the owners want to see a team because, like Kirk always says, and everybody wants someone else to answer their problems and questions. So if we can go in there and be like, as a united front, boom, here it is. This is why you're paying it. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to get out of it. We're not just charging you for masks and no one's going to wear masks. Dan is coming to me with this change order for mask or putting this into his bid up front. His guys are going to wear masks every day of this job site for the whole duration of the schedule. I'm going to enforce it. And if they're not, then we are going to deduct that money from the change order because Dan told me, and we're a team, that he was going to wear them,
Well, you're busting the balls if 4 hours out of a day, one of my guys isn't wearing a mask and we're going to deduct that from him. I mean, that's just, that ain't right. I mean, that's just right. And while the owner says he's not going to do it and he doesn't like it, and you're, okay, Mr. Owner, well, I'm going to kiss your ass because that's what you said, right? Well, that guy he's not looking out for you. He doesn't want you to make money. He doesn't care about you making money. And the next job that you bid is you're not going to get because you're not the low number, right? Because that's all that guy wants. He's not caring about if you make profit or your trade partners, which I really like that term, are making money or not, right? So do you really want to deal with that guy? What's your margin going to be at the end of the day? We all have to fill our G&A bucket. I get that, right? But do you want to be with somebody that really wants to kick your ass? And are you going to get that next job as a low guy if you're not looking at it? Kirk, this is the other thing, Kirk, this is something else I want to bring up too. And this is all through these discussions. I mean, you just see people in the store, people on the street. I mean, myself personally, you're wearing a mask and things like that. You really can't breathe that well, right? So there's a lack of productivity there.
No doubt.
About that.
Yeah, and that's
especially with the heat coming up right now too. Yeah.
Say again?
Something we're having. I was just gonna say, especially with the heat right now coming back too, it's something we've seen, particularly, everyone's got a mask up and they're worried about taking a drink with their mask down, getting called out, and it's a real problem. It's just something, not a problem necessarily, it's something else that's got to be managed, but yeah,
It is, and
it costs time, Dan, like you're saying, it's a real thing.
It's a productivity issue. I mean, I know for me, I don't go out without a mask, and obviously when I'm out in public doing shopping or whatever, I'm not doing heavy lifting. But I mean, to have a mask on for more than an hour is a pain in the ass, and that's going to affect productivity, no doubt. Now, one thing we know for sure, because we need to deal in facts, there is no problem with having carbon monoxide poisoning from masks. And I've seen those kind of memes and that's horseshit. That's not true. It's about fatigue, and it's about being hot, and it's about people being irritated, and that's the loss in productivity. That's why you got to get that 20%. Because when none of us caused this, the owners have to bear responsibility. Before we go too much further, and anybody else drops off, I want to make sure that I thank everybody because all of the participants because I think it's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed, the 11 weeks doing this, and I've learned a lot, and I think it's been fantastic, and all the contributions that everybody's made, So Nick, Mark, and Brad from your company, and Nick taking it as the GC, and Jeremiah sending such great emails and things like that, and Tyler, being that young owner who doesn't know shit. Yeah, and Dan being the old owner doesn't know shit. And
you go, Tyler.
and
Tyler, you and I are gonna conquer the fucking world, dude.
And then Dave and his good comments, and Philip, comes. I love Philip. Philip comes from a different perspective and lots of tremendous experience, and he's a wealth of knowledge. I encourage all of you. He's not a PHCC member, but stay in touch with Phillips. He's a really, really smart guy about all of this and can give you some insight internationally that makes a lot of sense. And then also I've had a lot of family who participated in this. And so my wife, Pam, today I had her cutting apart. I wrote that book that that change order is not a book, but a manual. And the only thing I had on my shelf, I didn't have an electronic copy of it. And so I had her cutting it apart today and scanning it and then making it available to everybody. So I appreciate her doing that. She doesn't get paid for that shit. And then my son Adam has been really the producer and set up the YouTube channel. And every Thursday night after class, he gets online and he gives me a list of 20 things that I could do better. And I really appreciate the heck out of that. That's really useful to me. Jacob, my other son, sitting there, who's living this shit every day. And he's a really smart dude. He majored in economics and German and jazz, and he's an electrical project manager, which is pretty cool. But he has good comments, and he shared some examples with us that we used earlier this class. And then Allison, my sweetheart of a daughter on there, who has been dying to give somebody the turtle, but it hasn't been a turtle kind of class, but she's been there every night. So shout out, yeah, Dan really should get it. I don't know if Allie has it, but Allie, if you have the turtle, we should give it to Dan before we go. But really, I wanted to give a shout out to everybody because this was a group, and then of course John and I are partners in all things, and he puts up with me, and I put up with him. But we put up each other for a long freaking time now.
Long time.
A long time. So I think Allie is sneaking off to get.
Yeah. And Kirk, I think on behalf of the class here, I think we really want to thank you and John. There's no words that can describe what you've been doing on this part. And if you have a glass, we'll raise it to both of you.
I'll raise it to you.
Thank you both. Thanks, everyone.
And then we'll raise another glass to your wife because she has to put up with you, and I don't know how the hell she does that.
I don't either.
I'm raising 2 glasses for his wife.
And just everybody that's been on here, cheers to you guys and gals that are on here. It's nothing but amazing, and hopefully we can continue the communications back and forth, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or whatever. But there's a a lot of good minds that are participating that I think we should really stick together on this one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's your turtle, Dan. Allie's got your turtle there with her dog, her son, a crab. But that's your turtle mascot. So you get a virtual mascot.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Will you please send it to the house so I can like sleep with it?
Yeah. The bad news is that turtle's not even slept before, so
Right, right, exactly.
you might want to delouse it first.
I remember I put it out in that freaking ledge outside the building in Lansdowne, and you couldn't find it. And it really chapped your ass.
It did.
So,
I think John ended up finding it probably, right?
right. But I really do want to say, I mean, Kirk, I mean, you and, you know, speaking about your family, all right, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Right? It really is true. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And it's good. And I'm sure the generation before you, the same. And you sharing your knowledge with us is just huge. I mean, it helps us through. You know, it's impactful not only to us but to our company. My wife works for the White House, right? So she works for the White House, and she listened in on a couple of our you know, conferences here. What the hell do we call this thing anyway? What is it?
A conversation.
Okay. Amongst buddies. And she's like that I mean, and she does this shit all day long, right? I mean, you know, Vice President Pence, I mean, it just, there's all kinds of shit. I mean, you wouldn't know it by, she's the nicest person and extremely intelligent, worked her way into a great position. I mean, she's very well known and very well respected, you know, throughout the country and actually internationally. And she said she was impressed about what she heard here going on with what we do.
That's cool.
Wow.
That's great. That's really nice feedback. That's good to hear. Thank you.
It really is. It's great. And then to the guys, Nick, you were saying this, and having this camaraderie, right, and professionalism and speaking with your peers, and it's like running into another freaking mechanical contractor at a picnic. That's the only guy you're going to talk to for the rest of the day, right? I mean, there's just that bond there. And to have this, and for me, really in DC, in some ways, we're kind of a bubble because it's just a different world. And to see what's going on with everyone else helps me understand the balance in the industry and what's going on, because it's not just what's happening in DC. It's not just what's happening in Toledo, Ohio. It's what's happening across the country. And that's what we have here. Right. And you know, Brad, I mean, you're awesome. You know what you brought to the table in your company. And I mean, everybody here, I mean, Phil, I mean, the petroleum industry, are you freaking kidding me? This guy's coming here and chatting with us. That guy's he's a freaking monster. Right.
Yep.
And he's sharing his knowledge with us.
Tell that to my wife as well.
Right. So here's my question to everybody, and Kirk and you too. Excuse me, Phil, I don't mean to interrupt you. I talked to Eric earlier. I talked to Lester and these things, but I'm Irish and we're fucking passionate people. That's why we like to drink and fight. But anyway, I would love to do this, like Nick said, every couple of weeks, once a month, you know, something like that. I mean, how often do we get a chance to do this?
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not going to say too much more than that, but personally, professionally, I want to say thank you to Kirk. Personally and professionally, I want to say thanks to everybody. I respect everyone here, you know, from the bottom to the top, to the top to the bottom. But just a general idea, okay, of how much you guys would like to do this more. It would be interesting.
Well, I appreciate the comments. What do you know, so I like the idea, you know, once a month or whatever. So, John, what's the best way to process that feedback? Is that part of your survey?
For this specific class, it's not, but I would say if the box at the bottom of the survey, that's additional thoughts. Yeah, if you guys wanted to do this kind of thing once a month where there's no agenda, there's no planned, learning activity, there's no prep, it's just dropping in and having a conversation about whatever is on your mind, what's happening in the jobs, following up on Clover and what happens in real life on your jobs and what's the result of all this. There's no reason why we can't do it.
But with to build on that, with a week's notice, if you give me a theme, then we can have materials and information and examples with the theme, right? Because I talk, because of what I do every week. Give me a week's notice, and we can have a couple hour discussion. So I don't know. What do y'all think about that? And just in general, no commitments required, but in general.
I know I said I wouldn't say anything else, but but I do agree with what you're saying as a theme. So Brad and Nick and people collectively will put something out there because we're all feeling the same pain. And then that could be something, all right, well, this month, the feedback that I got is this, and this is what I'm going to address. And that could be the first half of it. And I think, personally, 3 hours is too long. It's hard for me to get home by 7 o'clock, to be honest with you. Some nights I don't get home till freaking 10 o'clock, right? So
if you did your job better, you'd be able to be home.
I had a goddamn
boom
to say that. Right, but I think to get a consensus, I think that would be a good thing. And I'm going to try to sign it again, but I probably won't. Go ahead.
I would say I think that's great. Whether or not every meeting has an agenda, or if it just comes into what does everybody want to talk about? Jeremiah has something, Dan has something, Brad has something, whatever it may be. Every other month where whatever we do on it, we just skip the agenda, but every once in a while I'll have an agenda and just kind of go with that and be like, here's the topic we're going to talk about.
Yeah. I think it's a good idea. So you guys want to kind of loosely agree that we'll kind of play it that way?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great idea. Like to what Nick was saying, needs to be maybe not some stringent agenda, but needs to be kind of something so that we can all follow along. But yeah, I love the idea.
Good. What about so good? I think we all agree on that. What about I really am motivated, and who was it that gave the comment tonight about inviting, I'll say, people of color to this group to have discussions like that? Who said that? Who was it? I stole that idea from somebody. Who was that?
That was Tyler.
It was a young owner who doesn't know shit.
Young owner.
It's like you put a bunch of chimpanzees on a keyboard, eventually you're gonna get Shakespeare, right? What do y'all think about that idea? I love that idea. I'm really motivated to that idea.
No, yeah, if everybody said they could focus on bringing one other person that they know or they relate to, yeah.
What do y'all think about that?
No, that'd be
for
huge.
that.
Very huge.
Very insightful, and yeah, I think we'd all get a lot out of that.
Hell, really, and think. I think. What if we think big enough? What if you bring a kid who's graduating high school 3 months from now, who is Latino or female or African American, or just bring him just to be part of the fucking conversation.
To even go along with that, Kurt, I think just even bring in any high school kid, any college kid that's going into the industry or has that drive to be into it.
Even if they didn't say anything, if they just listened.
Right. Just to bring them in there. Like I said, we got interns that are just graduating, that are, doing their internships, that are sophomores, and it's like, you know what? You want to be a GC or PM? Here's a lot of valuable knowledge from the trades that you're not going to get because you're never going to go and do mechanical, electrical, or plumbing work ever in your life. You know, you chose to be a GC PM. That's it. All right. Here you go. Listen to Tyler. Listen to Brad. Listen to Dan. Listen to what their problems are that we might be causing, or what problems that are going on in their company and why they're coming to us with change orders, and shed the light. Why not?
Yeah.
Whether you're, whatever your background is, I mean, I think that would be valid in its own part. And then to go along with trying to call Tyler out, I'm still waiting for my plane ticket to come out there and work for you.
He's got the money.
You can drive to Wisconsin, Tyler, but I'm flying out there to you.
So it's a big thing. I think this group would benefit from other contractors, other trades. I think this group would benefit from more general contractors. I think this group would benefit from owners reps. What do y'all think about that?
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you know any owners reps that would be willing?
Sure.
I think they might even get some value from us, kind of based on that book you had us read, The Owner's Dilemma, and and showing them what we're up against.
I agree. I think it's the bigger tent that we build, the better, right? You know, what do y'all think?
Absolutely.
Phil, I apologize for interrupting you, but to have somebody like Phil, okay, who, I mean, is a monster in a monster industry, and what he's done and what he has accomplished, and I haven't heard a single thing from him that was not unassuming, you know, and to have a guy like that, you know, is participate. We're going to gain knowledge.
Yep.
And he's going to give us insight in really culture in our industry. And he's going through the same things that we are. He's got to learn. He's got to adapt. He's got to change. You know, all those things have no prejudice. Just because you've been in the industry 30 years or 3 years, there's no prejudice. You have to evolve. You have to learn. You have to, you know, share knowledge. You have to listen and learn. I mean, all those things. So, I mean, there's some really incredible people on these things. I mean, you know, I'm gonna miss you guys. I really am.
That's good, man. That's good. That's why we need that. So that's why we need to keep going. I like the idea of once a month, and maybe you know half of the year. You know, every other session has a theme or a topic, and every other session is the alternate session is just a free form kind of thing. And I like the idea of bringing other people. Let's make it a big tent. All I want to do is change the world, right?
Dan, I have a funny story. Dan, I have a funny story to share. I might have mentioned this to Kirk before. When I was in college at Ohio State, I needed to take an elective language, and all the traditional languages were shut out. And so I looked at the register, and they had Swahili, and then they had, and then I had to take a rec elective, which was golf. Now, looking back 30 years later, those two have probably helped me more than my studies in my major. Golf helped me with the connections, and I live on a course right now, and then Swahili helped me getting into the African construction market. So you just never know, and just out of necessity, it's always been the people that have been very different to me in religion and in ethnicity that have helped me out in my career.
That's awesome, and that's who everybody who is on this gig, right? And why are we here, right? It's because we have broad minds. And why are we here? It's because we have someone else with a broad mind, with a big view of the big picture, who's allowed us to have this platform. I mean, I mean, I couldn't do that myself personally, and I don't have any problem with saying that. But we have a platform that we can say that. But I mean, you have a broad mind, Phil, and that's why I'm saying you're freaking critical as shit, dude. We need you, right? We really do.
Well, Dan, to be honest with you, it was out of necessity. I mean, it was either that. I mean, I told Kirk this story. Originally, I got out of Ohio State. My first job was going to the Ohio Rust Belt to work in Warren, Ohio. And then a week later, the Japanese bought the place, and I was out of a job, and I had to figure out what to do. And that's when the overseas stuff started happening, and it just rolled into one to another. And it just warms my heart to know the hard work, because at the end of the day, what you guys do in the US market really sets the benchmark for others. I think Kirk can say that with his experience at Samsung. I've seen Asians, Europeans, Africans, South Americans. They truly view you guys as the benchmark in our global industry.
And you're absolutely correct with that. And that's why there's demonstrations going around in other places of the world and not just in the United States. Because we do set the benchmark. And other countries are feeling that. Right? And they're not just demonstrating to support the United States because they have some American connection. And I mean, I've traveled from Antarctica to Antarctica, and it doesn't matter. I'm nothing compared to you, Phil, as far as depth and culture. But I mean, I've seen it, and we do set the standard. However, as Americans, we're so concentrated in the United States, and we don't necessarily think that we are as important to the world as we actually are. And again, with having all the immigrants, I mean, again, I come from an immigrant family, and I'm out of that, right? And my wife and I were talking about this because I had some people over from work the other night, and one of them was from Syria, and she was saying like, wow, his point of view, and he's not being American. I'm gonna say that. Okay, I mean, it is. I was really surprised because she's very democratic, right? But he's not as far as becoming struggling a little bit. That was it. Struggling a little bit more to be part of the American culture. Like, well, not really, right? He wasn't. All right. We've learned over time, and what immigrants have gone through is that they don't want to lose their culture. It's not that they don't want to be Americans and they don't want to believe in our Constitution.
Sure.
They don't want to, be part of the country. You can say assimilate. I really don't like that word, right? But they don't want to lose their culture. Right? And that's why, and that's who we are as Americans. I mean, we have French words in our language, Spanish words in our language. We have Irish words in our language, like fuck off, right?
Is that where I learned it
I
from?
don't know.
No, but
Even,
Dan, you do make a good point. With that much heterogeneous workforce we have and people we have, we are productive. I mean, when you go to a country, Kirk, and you can comment on this as well too. For instance, Korea, or you go into China. That's a homogeneous society.
Yeah.
They can get their workforce easier, let's say, lack of a better word, I can't think, controlled or managed. But we got all of this diversity, yet we're pretty productive. And when you say cultures, my last name, as you can tell, it's a long last name. It's actually Russian, Armenian, but 3 generations ago. But I grew up in a small German town in Michigan, so I knew all the German holidays. So that is my culture. I mean, it's nothing more. I wouldn't know anything else. I mean, because that's what I grew up with. And
So
so,
when I say Dutch Mafia, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
yes, and that's exactly right.
Yeah.
But, to go along with the insight that Phil has given us, I don't think anyone on this conversation here ever thought we'd be in this conversation because of a pandemic.
Yeah. No.
I don't think anybody on this conversation ever thought we'd be talking about this conversation of economic crisis. So for Phil to bring up the topic of, possible overseas work, that goes to show you that anything's possible. Always have to just keep that open mind and kind of roll with the punches. And if things aren't happening, there's always somewhere else that you could dabble in, and
Yeah, well, I mean, no matter what, globalization, I don't care about anybody's politics, no matter what, globalization is not going away, period. Right? And so as business people, our job is to figure out how to be entrepreneurial and to be successful with both workers and customers, right? And so we need to make the construction industry in the United States better. I think everybody agrees with that. And we have the opportunity to do that, right? And so the good news is we can do good and do well simultaneously, and that should be our job, right? Our mission is to figure out how to keep doing the right things and make our industry better, and also then by definition making our companies more profitable. So anyway, I see Tyler's got his dog out. That's good. What's your dog's name, Tyler?
This is Bennett. Got Bennett. Yeah, we got one more chocolate lab. He's around here somewhere. He's probably just bumming around with his tennis ball or something.
That's good. Well, I have a message here, a text message here from Adam. He says, please tell everyone he's extremely grateful to have been part of the conversation and to expect an invitation to a larger digital presence and continued discussion. So, yeah, so you should expect that as well. I like the idea of doing it monthly. Let's all fill out the survey that John has put together. And now, while John's not listening, whenever you put he asked what you would pay for it, jack it way up.
Maxed it out.
For a half hour. Just make sure you tell him that. Because John's pretty conservative. And that's great. John and I are a good team. We're on the same page so much with so much stuff, and then he and I are different people at the same time, so that makes us a good team. So
John's a real talent, Kirk. I mean, he's a real talent.
Oh, no doubt.
And I mean, you're a hell of a man, no question. You guys are a great team.
It is a good team.
And like there's no I in team, right? Yep. And but you guys together are a great team. However, I will say
there's a however.
Kobe Bryant. Somebody asked Kobe Bryant. They said there's no I in team, and he goes, but there's a motherfucking me.
Iron Wayne.
No, John irritates me because now he's over 40 finally, and he still weighs like 140 pounds. Oh, how much do you weigh now, John?
I got past 150. I am maintaining in the 150s now.
That middle-aged
that is the Corona diet.
Yeah, so
I have lost weight since Corona.
All right. Well, I'm sure my wonderful wife Pam has dinner ready for me, and I'm sure you guys have things to do. So thanks to everyone, and I hope we actually do get together and do this and figure out how to make that work, and then bring other people along. I think that'd be a great thing. So,
thank you, Kirk.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just throwing this out here before we sign off. I love to hunt. Brad, I'm kind of calling you out. I want to see how the Thunder Chickens are down there.
He loves to hunt Brad.
Jeremiah, we talked about pheasants. Got pheasant dog. I'd love to elk hunt. Whatever you guys got, I'll come down.
So we'll go to Colorado and go elk hunting, right?
Exactly.
There you go.
Well, we hunt
Or you
birds
guys can
and
come to
geese
Texas.
in Virginia, man. We'll have you down here, brother.
All
What-
right, come
what do you have
down.
in Virginia?
Yeah.
In
We're on
Texas, will you
Chesapeake Bay.
guys-
It's like freaking incredible, man. We have snow geese. We have Canadians. We
Oh,
have
that's for the birds.
ducks. And we have we do birds. I mean,
Yeah, we need ring
there are
necks.
things. I mean, anybody can shoot a goddamn deer, man. I mean, can you shoot something moving?
Come on up here once. Get up here once. We'll see if you can shoot a deer. I'll put
Yeah,
you in
and
the
you guys
one.
ice fish up there. I mean, they're fucking. I mean, how much moving are they doing? Oh, I caught a fish ice fishing. Oh, that
It's not
was
about the
tough.
fishing at that point. It's about the
That's just an
drinking.
excuse to drink beer, right?
Find out how many beers you can drink in an hour.
That's all ice fishing about is drinking beer. All right. You guys later. It was good talking to you. Thanks so much for giving so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Kirk.
everyone.